Welcome to Political Beatdown. Dina, Ben Meiselas here to report some very big news. We have a jury verdict. Moments ago, before we were about to start, we heard that there was a verdict. We know that Friday is a motivating factor about juries coming up with decisions before the weekend. There's been about 12 hours of deliberations so far. The last we heard, Justice Merchan said he was going to excuse the jury for the day. And then we just heard quite literally moments ago that the jury has reached a verdict. Now, I think it is only fitting, Dina, that as we start Political Beatdown today, which is co-hosted by Michael Cohen, who was a witness in this case, a key witness in this criminal trial against Donald Trump, that at the very start of Thursday's Political Beatdown, moments before, it's poetic justice, if you will, though we'll have to see what the verdict ultimately is, that we would be able to hear this verdict. There it is, Midas Touch announcing we have a verdict in the Trump criminal trial in New York. Now, I don't want to spend the time speculating, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? We're going to find out together. We're going to respect the jury's verdict together, regardless of what the outcome is. But the jury has reached a verdict. I think that is a very, very big deal, and we will all experience it together here on Political Beatdown, a show that was co-founded by Michael Cohen. Dina, your reaction to this news moments ago that there is a verdict?
I mean, we are experiencing history. You and I, Ben, and reporting it, the Midas Touch community, and watching us now and hearing this verdict. These 12 jurors are going to be walking into the courtroom, and we are going to hear from the first foreperson who has ever deliberated for a former president's criminal trial. I mean, I cannot, like, the magnitude of this is just overwhelming. And for you to say, and it gave me chills when you've said how this was, for this show that Michael Cohen started because of the price he paid, being part of the conspiracy. And for anybody who doubts the importance of this case, the reason why it may not sound as bad as the January 6th case or the document classified case is because candidate Trump didn't have as much power to abuse as President Trump had the power. But he broke the law in order to win his campaign, and then sat in that Oval Office and signed those checks to cover it up. And no matter the verdict, he sat and heard weeks of testimony from really honest, credible witnesses who are brave enough to come forward and tell the truth. And history will have those transcripts. We all know that what he was willing to do to harm our democracy. So this is history. I am proud that we have been able to analyze this in a way that I think was fair, was thoughtful, was informative for other fellow Americans to be able to have followed along, to have come to their own decision about what they think about his guilt or innocence, to be able to articulate why they think this is so important, why they think the verdict should be. But to your point, once this foreperson says the verdict, we will all here on Midas Touch respect it, because that is what our justice system is about, is respecting those 12 people. Did they see it differently than you and I did? Possibly. And you know what? Donald Trump had his day in court, and whatever that juror says, the juror said. But I cannot overstate how happy I am that Alvin Bragg brought this case, and we all got to hear how much Donald Trump abused his power. And today we are going to see what this historic jury is going to decide. So Ben, what are you thinking right now? Because you have really started this network with that whole framework on mind of protecting our democracy, keeping people informed about Donald Trump. In a lot of ways, this is the culmination of your and your brothers and all the contributors' years of hard work.
Yeah, and I think you said it best there. Really, all of the contributors and the beatdown brigade who were watching this, the whole Midas Mighty community, where it was so important for us all to be very fact and evidence based. And whereas corporate media was focused on the hyperbole, the drama, creating kind of both sides dynamics, what was very important for us was to show everybody the checks, show everybody all of the financial disclosure documents, to show everybody the handwritten notes, to show everybody Donald Trump's posts, to show everybody the testimony, to show everybody the jury instructions, right? Like when we talk about jury instructions, what does that mean? So I was proud that in a video we put out today, we went through the jury instructions that this jury got to see. So we kind of demystify the process, and everybody got to see the same exact types of instructions that the jury gets on evidence and circumstantial evidence and witness credibility. And, whereas on corporate media or on propaganda media, they say things like, we don't know what the crime is. There is no crime. No one explained the crime ever. That's just so deceptive and so not true. We should go through the elements of it and see if the elements are ultimately, met and satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the prosecutor's burden. But it's important that we live in a fact-based and evidence-based world. And I'm proud that our coverage, regardless of the outcome here, met the moment and provided our audience, provided, more importantly, our community here, because this is a community more than a network, with the facts and evidence that really filled that gap that doesn't exist on corporate media. It's also not without irony that when the E. Jean Carroll verdict was read as well, that was during a Political Beatdown episode at that exact moment. I mean, granted, Political Beatdown just so happens to start when courts usually end. So the coincidence there may be based on that. But I like to think that being able to talk about these verdicts again on a show that was co-founded with Michael Cohen, I think has some important symbolism, has some important significance. Also, as soon as we hear the verdict, I don't know how soon thereafter we'll be able to get Michael Cohen on the show, if even we can get him on right after the verdict, because then Michael Cohen will be able to discuss this case. He will be able to rejoin Political Beatdown. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing, Dina, is reaching out to Cohen, seeing if Cohen will be able to provide that first reaction to the verdict here on the Midas Touch Network on his show, Political Beatdown. So definitely a significant historical moment. And Dina, I would say, the prevailing narrative and wisdom, which I agree with, is that if you were Donald Trump's lawyers and you were the defense, you were hoping for a hung jury. I think that's the prevailing concept, that you were hoping the jury would not reach unanimity, because you would think that a unanimous jury would normally mean guilt. So if you were the Trump team, you've been saying, we hope there's one holdout or two holdouts in this jury that's not going to budge. They may be snuck into the jury right here. And that's what Trump and the defense team, I think, was hoping for. And so, again, I don't want to try to read the tea leaves here and say, look, this definitely means this or that. But I think if you were to frame this appropriately right now, the fact that there is a verdict and the jury was able to reach a unanimous decision, would seem to be something that would lean more favorable to the prosecution. We don't know is the reality, though. But I think Trump and the defense were hoping for a hung jury. The fact that we at least know on many counts or some counts it's not a hung jury, I think is is important. What do you think, Dina?
Yeah, I mean, Senator Ted Cruz was out on the news media last night asking for one juror to, come to their senses and basically not have a verdict. That's the kind of argument you make when you don't think you have a factual and legal argument. Certainly is what the campaign and his talking people were asking for was one holdout. That seemed to be what they thought they needed. Like you said, we're going to see momentarily here whether or not that's true or not. But that was what they said, which it was really hard to hear that from Senator Cruz, because, again, I know I shouldn't be surprised, but to be a senator and to be a lawyer and basically asking a juror to go against the law and just decide not to because they like Donald Trump. This is where we were in the discourse. There were so many kind of lies about this case. The amount of people who said the jury, this is unconstitutional because the jury doesn't have to decide altogether on the crime. That's not true. This is a crime of fraud. They all have to find unanimous decision around the 34 counts of the falsification. It was just about what the unlawful means were, what the concealed crime had to do with. But, this, we're not surprised about this with Donald Trump. This is all about disinformation for him. Their jury instructions that Judge Merchan said, I pinned it to my social media because I truly believe everybody should be able to read this for themselves, be able to decide for themselves. And there was a portion of that explicitly about fairness. And there's a page where he asks the jurors to be fair in their deciding of this case. And it is something that Donald Trump is incapable of. He loves to use that word fair. He throws it around and says things are unfair when really he's just saying, it's not going his way. But Judge Merchan, despite weeks of bashing, weeks of defaming him, really disparaging him and our justice system, issued the most eloquent words calling upon these 12 jurors to be impartial and fair to this man who has not acted in any way fair to the court. But that is what these jurors are called upon to do. That is what our justice system requires. That is the strength of our democracy. And that is why we see Trump and the Senator Cruzes and the Mike Johnsons and all of them, not talking about the facts and the law, but trying to disparage and bring down our justice system because, Trump him and his supporters don't have that integrity of Judge Merchan. They don't have the integrity that these 12 jurors have, the integrity of our justice system. And despite all that, that is what the jurors were called upon to do. I recommend anybody to read that because they were so eloquent. And it is a reminder that regardless how bad a defendant can be in that court, every defendant in our country gets a fair trial. Whether or not they're as obnoxious as Donald Trump or not, they get a fair trial. That is what Donald Trump got. He even has the right, let's say he does get a conviction. He has the right to multiple appeals. Our justice system has integrity. It has fairness. Sometimes judges get it wrong, and that's why they have appeals. Sometimes that's why they have, a new trial. We have those mistakes, remedies for mistakes baked in. But I really hope that I think what you have done as a community here, people have been informed. They've been able to, like you said, see the checks for themselves, hear the language for themselves, make decisions for themselves. And I think that is what we need to do to protect our democracy, is be informed and be educated and be unwilling to be swayed by the frank misinformation that is going to be a constant between now and November and quite frankly, probably after November.
Breaking news, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg has now entered the courtroom as we await a verdict. Less than 20 minutes from now, folks, a verdict will be read in the Donald Trump criminal trial. And Dina, about a week ago or so, you said the way corporate media is covering this has been so poor, it's been so bad that when there is a verdict, almost regardless of the verdict, the American people, the world, is not really going to be prepared for it. Of course, our community here is going to be prepared for it, and will respect it, whatever the verdict is, whether we agree with it or don't agree with it, because we agree with the jury system, and we could be disappointed or happy, but we agree with a fair and impartial jury, and we agree with the system. But like this news, Dina, now, just like you predicted, is kind of hitting this country like a thud, and it shouldn't, right? It should not hit people should have been prepared. And the way it was covered in kind of a strange horse race, both sides ism, focusing on aspects that actually were not that impactful and trying to build drama about a portion of Cohen's testimony that people in the courtroom didn't even say land with the actual jury. It's a historic moment that may have caught people by surprise, like, whoa, it is really here right now. But look, we keep expanding here on the Midas Touch Network, our legal offerings. I want to remind everybody as well, the new show that we have, it's called Mistrial, led by Karen Friedman Agnifilo and other top female prosecutors. Check out the audio feed right there. It's called Mistrial. Dina, you'll be expanding our legal offerings as soon as this trial is done. There will be a Dina show as well that you and I are finalizing the details around. Of course, there's Legal AF. And then there's the Midas Touch podcast as well, all here on the Midas Touch YouTube channel. Make sure you all hit subscribe right now. It's free to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and we have all of those offerings. But make sure, everybody, you also subscribe to that audio feed. What I want to do right now of the show Mistrial, Dina, what I want to do right now, because once we come back, it's just going to be continuing coverage, and I want to just spend a few minutes reaching out to potentially other co-hosts. I want to reach out to Michael Cohen and see if we could get Michael Cohen to react first here on Political Beatdown. So we have about 40,000 people watching live right now. And what I hope you will all allow me to do is we'll play a quick ad break, but I want to use the time to reach out to Michael Cohen, see if he can give his reaction first here on Political Beatdown, reach out to some others as well. This is history in the making, folks, right here on Political Beatdown. Dina and I will be right back for the historic verdict.
A small regret is slouching in the dentist chair thinking, I should have brushed and flossed better. A big health regret is listening to your doctor and thinking, I should have paid attention to nutrition when I was younger. Better health today and when it matters most is why I take Field of Greens. Field of Greens is unlike any fruit and vegetable or green product. Field of Greens isn't watered down extracts. Field of Greens is an organic superfood. It's whole fruits and vegetables. Each fruit and vegetable was selected by doctors to support vital body functions like heart, liver, kidneys, metabolism, and the immune system. And only Field of Greens is backed by a better health promise. At your next checkup, your doctor will notice your improved health or your money back. Don't look back and say, I should have paid attention to nutrition when I was younger. Field of Greens is key to better health today and when it matters most. Let's get you started with 15% off and free shipping. Visit fieldofgreens.com and use promo code BEAT. That's promo code BEAT at fieldofgreens.com.
Hey, we are back. I just paused the conversation that I was having. Sorry, hypothetically, Michael Cohen, if I was rude right there. Dina, why don't you chat for a little bit? I'm going to put myself on mute while I quickly finish that convo with Cohen right now, hypothetically.
I mean, hypothetically, let's be in Donald Trump's mind right now. He, for all of his bluster, I thought his press conferences, his post-trial press conferences were getting, the vibe, the energy was getting lower and lower. And especially the last one he gave where he did his usual bluster about the judge and Mother Teresa, didn't quite have the same panache. I think him being in his shoes and having zero control over this, zero control. This is somebody who controls everything. They read it in the book. He micromanaged his business. He couldn't even try to let the 2016 campaign, just go at whatever was going to unfold. He managed that with the Trump Tower meeting, and he cheated his way. He's such a control freak. And now this man, this former president, is at the will of 12 ordinary New Yorkers, and he can disparage them all he wants. He can think anything he wants about them, but they have power over his fate right now. And we don't know if he's going to be convicted. We don't know if that means he's going to serve probation or jail. We don't know the outcome. But him in that position of knowing these 12 jurors may can put that label on him for the rest of his life that he is a felon. He can do nothing about that now. Nothing about that now. And as much as all of us in this community, I'm sure, are just itching for a verdict. I know I am. I'm like, come on, let's get this time. Let's get this time moving. And for us, it's going to mean something, of course. For him, this is his life. And for somebody like him who has cheated his way his entire life, to be even in this moment called to task to face the consequences of his actions. Again, we don't know what the verdict says, but having to stand when the judge tells him to stand, having to listen when the foreperson informs him of his fate, puts him in a position that Donald Trump never wants to be put in. It puts him in a vulnerable position. He is powerless over what they now decide. And I can't imagine how somebody as corrupt as him and as somebody as unwilling to accept defeat as him, I mean, he literally caused an insurrection because he couldn't fathom losing to Joe Biden, how he feels in this moment, knowing there is nothing he can do or say. And it is these 12 ordinary New Yorkers. And it sounds like the judge is on the bench, which means we are getting closer. I think part of the reason we were able to even get this verdict so close is because Donald Trump stayed in the courtroom, in part because of his Secret Service. And it looks like they are bringing the jury out now. And welcome, Michael Popak, this history-making moment that we're seeing as the jurors file in. What Donald Trump's fate is going to be, he has to be contemplating that now. And we get to finally hear what these 12 jurors think about the weeks of trial we have all been witnessing.
Yep. Hi, Ben. Hey, Dina. 34 counts. 12 pieces of evidence related to books and records, 11 about checks, 11 about invoices. And all they asked for was to have David Pecker and Michael Cohen's selective testimony read back, getting through a relatively short deliberation period. The velocity at which they're moving is extraordinary. 9 hours is not a long time given how many hours that were required just to give them some information they needed. And the jury instructions that they asked to have read back to them are not good for Donald Trump. I'll just say it out loud. The accessory to a crime elements to talk about how Michael Cohen and David Pecker could have been also committing a crime and all of that. Yes, Dina, you did. I don't owe you dinner, but that's you're beyond a mentalist on that. We'll talk about that offline. But the particular instructions that they've asked for and the crimes, the second crime that's necessary to make this a felony, giving them a menu choice of either federal election law, state election law, or or tax fraud, and them asking for certain elements of that to be read back to them. None of that, including the time that this took, 9 hours, which is really maybe 3 hours of deliberation. If you boil away all the rest of that 5 hours, that does not bode well for Donald Trump.
So it's also worth noting that Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is in the courtroom. Justice Merchan has just called the jury into the courtroom moments ago as well. The officer of the court said no outbursts to anybody when the verdict is read, as Tyler McBrien reports. Keep the outburst to a minimum and stay in your seats afterwards until you're given further instructions. A court officer tells everybody who's in the courtroom it is tense. Trump amazingly has closed his eyes, according to McBride. And I do want to say this, though. Regardless of the outcome here, we will respect that outcome on Political Beatdown, on the Midas Touch Network. We're not going to be saying it's rigged. We're not going to be saying it's unfair. Sure, if Donald Trump is not convicted, will that ultimately be disappointing based on the evidence and facts that we saw? Absolutely, it will be disappointing, but this is a law and order network. We respect the verdict of juries here, first and foremost, and I want to make that point very clear here, and I hope that's what you appreciate about our coverage, how fact-based, evidence-based it's been every step of the way. Dina, what are you thinking about right now when we're just moments away from this verdict in the Trump criminal trial?
I think that this moment of finally holding Donald Trump to account, and is it because he gets a guilty verdict, or is it because he has to stand there and listen to what that jury foreperson says? That is also our justice system. We now have on record for all of history everything that he tried to do to interfere with that 2016 election, to get into that Oval Office, that set off a chain of events that then allowed him to abuse the power of that Oval Office. January 6th, classified documents. This case started it all. If he had not gone into that Oval Office, none of the rest of it would have happened. This moment is the beginning of how our democracy has been affected by Donald Trump. And it did hold him to account. These last few weeks will never go away. People heard things they never heard before. There was finally a consequence to his action. Do I want to hear the verdict? I want to hear, of course. And
the verdict has just been reached. The jury hereby finds defendant Donald J. Trump guilty on the first count. The remaining counts are being recited. Let me repeat that again. The Trump criminal trial verdict is in. We, the jury, find defendant Donald J. Trump guilty of the first count. The remaining counts are being recited. So we have a guilty verdict here.
We got more. We got up to 10 counts guilty.
Popak, you want to take it away there?
Yeah, we've got reporting as we expected. This is a binary decision. The 35, I always thought it was he's either in or out, guilty or not guilty of all counts. And that's how the jury is finding it. He's guilty of the second count, third count, fourth count, fifth count, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th. I believe this will go right straight to the 34th count as a guilty plea. No holdouts here. Complete unanimity by this jury on all 34 counts. The 34 counts, they either bought that Donald Trump was in a criminal conspiracy to either interfere with the election or to commit tax fraud as part of his business record fraud, or they did not. They obviously did unanimously. And now we're going to see, I'm sure, a 34-0 for this much beleaguered Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who now has 17-count conviction against Donald Trump 2 years ago and his organization for tax fraud on top of 34 counts. That's 51 counts in two separate juries, 24-0 on juries for this Manhattan District Attorney, who's the only one that first indicted and now prosecuted successfully Donald Trump for his criminal conduct.
We can confirm that Donald Trump has been found guilty on all 34 counts. Let me repeat that. Donald Trump has been found guilty on all 34 felony criminal counts. It was a wipeout there moments ago. Guilty, 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 guilty. I say that over and over again because that's what Donald Trump heard as he was sitting in the courtroom moments ago, just like that. I wasn't doing that to be hyperbolic. That is what Donald Trump heard. We, the jury, find defendant Donald J. Trump guilty on the first count. Then they went through each and every count and found him guilty of all 34 counts. We now will move into the sentencing phase as well. We will see what else is going on in the courtroom right there. But this was a historic moment. The fact that we are able to read that verdict here on Political Beatdown, a show co-hosted with Michael Cohen. I want to remind everybody as well to go to patreon.com/political beatdown, patreon.com/political beatdown. We're not funded by outside investors here at the Midas Touch Network. And thank you to everybody who's helped support this show. And one of the ways you've done that's patreon.com/political beatdown. We will set up a exclusive Zoom meeting with Michael Cohen on that Patreon feed. I can't tell you exactly when that's going to happen. There's a lot of history being made right now, but we are looking to arrange that, and we will let you know as soon as we do that. Dina, what do you make of all of this? And then we'll go to you, Popak.
Sure.
We are going to retire the name Teflon Don and replace it with Felon Don. For the rest of his life, he will now be a convicted felon. That will always be part of his legacy. I am not surprised about this verdict. Ben, you and I have been talking about this for weeks. I think we even were predicting it to be today. There was overwhelming evidence in this case, so much so that I'm upset the DOJ didn't bring this case, but at least here we have a conviction. Donald Trump had to face the consequence of his actions. He cheated his way into the Oval Office and covered his tracks, and he is paying for it today. Finally, the American people are getting justice by these 12 jurors who gave him the impartial and fair jury justice that he deserved because he was an American citizen. Even if he didn't act like he deserved it, he deserved it. But the evidence was overwhelming. The questions we got from the jurors, they were clearly looking at the crux of the case, that Trump Tower meeting. They wanted to hear an audio, most likely the Trump phone call to Michael Cohen talking about the Karen McDougal payment. And I've said this so many times, if anyone follows me on social media, Nixon was brought down by the tapes. Donald Trump was brought down by the tape. I can think of no other more compelling evidence than hearing Donald Trump himself talking about that payment and the inference that he then made that payment with Stormy Daniels after corroborating testimony between Pecker and Cohen on that Trump Tower meeting. That's all the jury needed to hear to give that conviction today. Definitely more than justified.
Yep. And I totally reinforce what Dina said, but in particular, Donald Trump has already started to pollute, even before this verdict, this overwhelming wipeout, as Ben said, has already started to inoculate his followers by putting out in the media earlier today a false statement about the jury instructions. The judge did not, and this is for our audience that needs to debate these things around their dining room tables and on the streets. The judge did not tell the jury that they did not have to reach unanimous verdict about the crimes and the fundamental crime. Trump told people that the judge, how outrageous, how unconstitutional. He said it could be a 4-4-4. 4 could find one crime, 4 could find another, and 4 could find a third. That's wrong. There had to be unanimity on the false business record crime, the 175.10 penal law crime. the second crime, the predicate crime, that could be a choice that the jury did not have to be unanimous on in terms of either federal election law, state election law violation, or a tax crime or fraud. So this whole they could pick from a menu, and it didn't have to be unanimous. And how outrageous! This is New York law. This is how general willful intent and deception and fraud works when you're doing to ratchet it up to a felony. Everything was appropriate. You mentioned the sentencing before. There's going to be a gap now. Judge is going to have to decide whether to release him, which I imagine he will, release him out, and then have him come back at a date certain for sentencing. There'll be some reports that are made. There'll be some weighing in filings by both sides, recommending incarceration and jail time on the prosecution side, recommending something else, probation or less on the defense side. And then this Judge Rashan, the one who's taken so much heat and so much grief unnecessarily, inappropriately, and his family is, as we've always said, has Donald Trump's liberty in the palm of his hands, as every criminal defendant does. That's all Donald Trump is now. He is a convicted felon, Donald J. Trump, plain and simple. That's how he'll be listed on all the papers. And this judge will decide in the next month or two whether it's going to be probation, jail time, or some combination of the two. And of course, we'll be following it closely here on the Midas Touch Network and on Legal AF.
Want to remind everybody to hit subscribe right now to this YouTube channel. It is free to subscribe, so hit the subscribe button right now. Thank you for making the Midas Touch Network's coverage of the Trump criminal trial and this guilty verdict the #1 destination across all digital media, beating MSNBC, Fox, CNN, and others. We appreciate your trust. A historic moment indeed, Dina and Michael Popak. And to be able to report it here on Political Beatdown, a show co-founded by Michael Cohen, it is poetic justice, perhaps the ultimate poetic justice, on Michael Cohen's show to lead all coverage in the world of the reading of this guilty verdict. And Dina, you said that the world would potentially be shocked by this because of the coverage by corporate media, and they shouldn't have been. They should have been following the evidence, and that's what they should have been doing. Michael Popak, I want to thank you. We have a new guest joining us right now. Karen Friedman Agnifilo will be joining us. Karen Friedman Agnifilo, you were the former #2 at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. You co-host the Legal AF podcast. What's your reaction?
I mean, this is historic. I can't even believe I'm trying to get centered here. Okay. I had to sneak away. I have 2 minutes to talk to you guys, but I couldn't not be here. I couldn't not be with my Midas Touch family in this historic moment. I mean, just a 34 count conviction, a clean sweep. And the thing that everybody has to say, first of all, is when Donald Trump goes out there and says that he couldn't get a fair trial here, this jury deliberated for more than 12 hours. That's a long time. If they were just not going to give him a fair trial, if they were just going to convict him no matter what, that would have been 12 minutes or maybe an hour to get a free lunch. But I'm telling you right now, they spent 12 hours. They got read back. They looked at the law. They spent time, and they gave him a fair trial. This is a historic moment, and I've never been more proud of the Manhattan DA's office, my former office that I worked at for 30 years. This is what they do, and they are just amazing. And I'm emotional over how incredibly proud I am that they took on a case like this. It's an important case. And more importantly, this is not a hush money case. The jury agreed with the prosecution, with Alvin Bragg, that this was about stealing an election, frankly. This was about hiding and suppressing information from the American people. And to remind everyone, Donald Trump won in 3 swing states by 80,000 votes. So maybe this would have made a difference. It's a big deal when you hide and you try to not play by the rules and you're not fair. So this is a huge conviction. It's a historic conviction. It's an important case. Don't let anyone say otherwise. And I'm just so proud of the Manhattan DA's office. I'm sorry I have to jump.
Karen, thank you for that. Michael Cohen just posted moments ago, guilty on all counts, hashtag Team Cohen. That's Michael Cohen's first response there. Guilty on all counts, hashtag Team Cohen. Hugo Lowell, who's in the court, reports the following. Donald Trump has a deep frown on his face as the jury finds him guilty on all 34 counts of felony falsification of business records. Trump lead lawyer Todd Blanche is looking away from Donald Trump with his left hand to his temple. Trump lawyer Emile Bove looks resigned. The table of the losers right there, Dina. And we have some footage outside the courthouse right now from some of the MAGAs who are not too pleased about this outcome. I want to share this video with you in just a moment. I want to give a shout out, though, to Olia Scootercaster from freedomnews.tv. Follow her on social media. She's been doing a great job getting this footage outside of the court. And I always want to give a hat tip to independent media. Again, her name is Olia Scootercaster, and they're called freedomnews.tv. Before playing that, I want to just tell everybody some more updates. Sentencing is scheduled for July 11th. We just learned that moments ago. How long will Donald Trump be serving in prison? Will he be serving prison time? That will be decided on July 11th. This is outside the courthouse right now. Let me show you this video. Let's play it.
Trump motherfuckers! Piece of shit! The judge is a piece of shit! The Jesus James is a piece of shit!
They just killed our country. You just fucking let
Alvin
them.
Bragg is a piece of
Pussy
shit!
motherfucker.
You're all owned by China!
Welcome to your
China owns
You're
Biden!
Alvin Bragg.
Biden owns you!
You're Al.
I didn't realize that. I apologize. I didn't realize we didn't have the bleep out right there, but you could imagine what that video is going to look like for the remainder of the time. Dina, your reaction to the news that sentencing will be July 11th, and just your reaction to this historical moment right now.
This is so historic. And you brought it up before, and how I really did think the country was unprepared for this moment. I think it was obvious. I mean, that's what I do for a living, is watch trials. It was obvious watching this trial that the prosecution had more than enough evidence to convict. And there was so much, both sides in some, as you said, with the analysis. There was so much attention paid to the cross-examination about the phone call with a 14-year-old. It was a disservice to the American people. Instead of focusing on the strength of the prosecution's case, there was this, for whatever reason, willingness to act as if he had a good defense. He didn't have a good defense. This was one of the strongest cases, to be honest, that I have analyzed, and seeing that disconnect between, hey, this is not usually the response to a strong case, and hearing that really made me worried, saying we are not going to be prepared as a country. I think the repercussions of truly having a nominee for one of our major parties being a convicted felon is something we have never dealt with a country. And we may think we know what that's going to look like, but I don't think we know actually what that's going to look like. We may think we know how people are going to feel, but we don't know how people are going to feel. We have not prepared people. Your community is so, and maybe I could say our community, because I'm so excited to do more here, is so informed. But the average person that I talk to actually about this is not even paying attention. They're not paying attention, or they're hearing the dramatic snippets, and they are going to be shocked. And they may hear the Fox talking points. And yes, we have to counter the Fox talking points that, of course, there had to be unanimity on the crime. The crime was fraud. Under New York law, the concealed crime could have actually been a crime committed by somebody else. Of course, there had to be unanimity on the fraud. But instead of just countering the Fox talking points, we have to talk about why they got a conviction. They got a conviction because they had Trump on tape talking about a key part of that conspiracy. Do you know how many lawyers would love evidence like that? They had his own tweets admitting to this being a reimbursement. They had a court filing in California admitting to this being a reimbursement. That kind of evidence is not evidence you get every day as a trial. I barely heard that from the typical news, barely heard how unique it was to have. He didn't have to take the stand. He testified. And that.
And as Dina's computer deals with some of the lagging issues right there, I want to give everybody the most up-to-date news, which is that Donald Trump will be sentenced on July 11th at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So everybody mark your calendars there. 4 days later, the Republican National Convention begins. Want to show you what Don Jr. just posted moments ago. Don Jr. wrote, "Guilty on all counts. The Democrats have succeeded in their years-long attempt to turn America into a third world shithole. November 5 is our last chance to save it." This is what Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney, posted moments ago. "Today, a jury found Donald J. Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts." And one of the exhibits that were actually entered into this trial was found at store.meidastouch.com, where the defense was trying to, remember this? Now this is 100% accurate. This is the Mea Culpa podcast gear right here at store.meidastouch.com. Donald Trump's lawyers were cross-examining Michael Cohen about this gear that was sold on the Midas Touch merch store, and they tried to act like the Midas Touch merch store was owned by Michael Cohen, which it wasn't, and Cohen pointed out. And by the way, what a hero Michael Cohen is. He always was in my mind, but what a hero he is right now for our country, for the world. And the fact that we're able to even report this on Political Beatdown is incredible. So if you want to get the now very, very famous, authentic Michael Cohen shirt that was talked about, go to store.meidastouch.com. There it is, the Mar-a-Lardo Correctional Facility shirt. Go to store.meidastouch.com. Our products are 100% union made, 100% made in the USA. So don't get the counterfeit stuff. Get the originals at store.meidastouch.com. That also helps this program and helps the Midas Touch Network. And there it is, the Mar-a-Lardo Correctional Facility gear right there. And also there's the Convict or Convict 45 gear that was always being sold at store.meidastouch.com. Make sure you get the authentic stuff. There's so many people who sell the rip-off cheap stuff. Get the real stuff from store.meidastouch.com. Here is the first reaction from Donald Trump. Let's play this right now, and then I want to get your reaction to it, Dina. Let's play this clip.
"This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial.
And then, Dina, I'll let you read this Jasmine Crockett post. We'll put it up there. I'll give you the honors. Are you able to see it? Is it large enough on your screen?
I know. I was like, can I? Sure. I think so. Or do you want? Why don't you read it, Ben?
Okay. It says, "View guilty on all counts in a state case. No matter what happens in November, he cannot undo this verdict. I know many are celebrating, and I get it, but my heart effing breaks for our country." Sorry, Dina, I wasn't trying to trip you up with an F-bomb there. Maybe I was. How did we get here? When did we stop requiring some darn decency of the most powerful person on earth? The grand jurors, the prosecutors, the judge, the witnesses, and this jury deserve so much more than they will receive. This was a brave undertaking in an unnecessarily violent and politically charged America. FYI, today was a win for the rule of law. Your reaction, and sorry for making you read an F-bomb.
She's absolutely right. I mean, the evidence was here to support this verdict, but it took a level of bravery from these 12 people, because we have seen what his supporters are willing to do in his name. We've seen the violence, the Capitol police officers who have died, who speak of their injuries. This is not just maybe getting, an angry social media post your way. His supporters, not all of them, but some of them can be very threatening and scary. We've seen the poll workers and what they've gone through. These jurors were willing to be brave, willing to set that aside, willing to sit and listen to the evidence. They deliberated for hours. The questions that they asked, to me, was so thoughtful. They asked the judge, what does it mean to have evidentiary inference? Because of course they don't have Donald Trump admitting it. How can you infer that he did it? They asked for the testimony about the Trump Tower. They asked to hear the audio. They put it together, but they had more than enough to put it together. But that bravery, Ben, that took something, to be willing to block out that outside noise, to be willing to listen to the judge and deliver justice as we require in this country. They will, for good or for bad, they have been part of history, and it will probably forever have changed their lives.
So, Dina, this is an exclusive that I'm giving right here on the Midas Touch Network. So, my business partner, one of my best friends in the world, is Colin Kaepernick. And so Colin just sent this to me exclusively here that we could show on the Midas Touch Network. You know what Kaepernick's jersey number was in his Pop Warner Football League? 34. As in guilty 34 times for Donald Trump. I think we've got the photo, Salty and Jeremy, if we've got the exclusive photo right here of Colin Kaepernick wearing that number 34 jersey for football or for basketball. We're going to be posting it in just a minute, but there it is right there. That was Kaepernick's basketball jersey, 34. That was his Pop Warner football jersey right there. I want to thank Colin Kaepernick for the sense of humor to send that to me as we lead all digital media coverage of the guilty verdict. Sorry, Dina. I just wanted to share that as well, because you're not going to see that anywhere else.
No, and I love it. And the reason why I don't know for sure, but I think the reason why he sent it was because, and I think so many of us feel wronged by Donald Trump. I mean, what he said and did, when Colin was trying to stand up for rights, the bullying, he's been a bully, and what Michael Cohen has had to deal with, paying the biggest price of his association with Donald Trump. And he always got away with it. Not only did he get away with it, but he became president. And it just so hard, I think, for so many of us to see this man cheat and be corrupt and honestly just be so mean to so many people, that this verdict is, I think, why he maybe sent it to you is we all feel like a sense of validation that finally he is paying some sort of a price for his actions. Like I said, no more Teflon Don. Now it's Felon Don. And it's somebody who is not getting away with things. And I really hope that that's the beginning, and maybe taking down, bursting that bubble that the Republican Party thinks he's like this mystical figure that can do no wrong. I hope that this pierces that, and he starts to have to face the consequences of a lot of his actions, criminal, and also just all the mean, awful, bigoted, racist, anti-Semitic, all the things he's done. Hopefully he can finally start to have to face those consequences too.
Dina, I want to share with you when Fox had to read this verdict. I always like sharing, like when Fox has to read like really good economic data and they're sad about that. Well, this is like the ultimate version of that, where they had to share with their audience that they've been lying to their audience all of this time, and all of the BS that they've spewed when it went in front of a fair and impartial jury that Donald Trump had equal say in picking. The jury found Donald Trump guilty on all 34 counts. We have this video of, I think you'll hear some people cheering as the Fox host is reading this verdict. Let's play this video if we've got it. You could hear people celebrating in the background, and that's how most of the country really feels about this moment. You know, I am so sick and tired of corporate media bogus narratives telling us things that we know are just false with our own observation. 100,000 people showed up at Wildwood, New Jersey. The entire area didn't hold more than 20,000 people, and it wasn't even half full. There was like 8,000 people, 25,000 people in the Bronx. No, there wasn't. It was like 3,000, and a lot of people left during the middle of the speech. Stop with the lying. Just report on what's happening, show the facts, show the evidence, let people know you could have different opinions than ultimately we have. That is absolutely fine. And we actually try to bring in a lot of opinions on this network, right? We have mainstream Republicans, independents, Democrats. I mean, there are people who support this network that span Bernie Sanders supporters to, believe it or not, like DeSantis supporters who come here and say, look, I may agree with you or disagree, and everything in between, like Biden supporters and everybody else. Mainstream Republicans, right, left, we just want to talk about the facts, and we could have significant and strong disagreements, you know, on things. I'm okay with that, but I'm glad this has become a destination to try to just pierce through those lies. And what you and I and the rest of our team here in this community has done has made an effort every day going through the testimony. Go back 7 weeks ago when this all started. We went through the testimony line by line. We went through the jury instructions. We went through the checks. We went through the handwritten notes. We went through the bank statements. We went through the audio. We went through Donald Trump's own statements that Trump wanted to keep away from the jury. We went through each and every witness, from the C-SPAN archivist to David Pecker to Michael Cohen. We talked about what really went down during those 21 hours of Michael Cohen's testimony. By the way, all of those reporters who were trying to trash Michael Cohen when you and I were saying, that's not what happened in the courtroom. And you had all these corporate media types that wanted to push this narrative. This was a big Perry Mason moment, and Michael Cohen this and Michael Cohen that. And you and I were like, that's not what happened in the courtroom. We have people in the courtroom. We have people there, multiple people there, who give us multiple different perspectives on what's going on. And what the corporate media is reporting simply wasn't what was happening. That's what was so frustrating. And if anything, Cohen's testimony was as impressive as you get. 21 hours on the stand, 21 hours doing anything, but 21 hours on the stand is very impressive. Dina, what do you make of this all?
He had, his testimony was excellent. And I do remember that day because there was a disconnect. It was like the news was waiting for the dramatic moment and they thought this was it. But in terms of the trial and the evidence, it was not it. And that's what I love about this community. And the goal of it is, you know, I was a journalist before I went to law school, and I'm really of the belief everybody should have the information. Like, we're lawyers, we're going to give our opinion, but it's okay to have a different opinion, but you won't be able to make your own opinion if you don't have the information. And so here, there's not just an analysis of what happened, but it is telling and showing, what did he testify about? What did those checks look like? The fact that he admitted to the reimbursement in that NDA, in California, like actually talking about the facts of the case. And then people can make their own decision, respecting each other to be able to make our own decisions, even if we disagree, rather than just telling somebody the way we think it should be. And I think that's why this community has just exploded. I also think that's why it's still at the beginning, because I think that there's a real need and want for information so people can decide for themselves. And you're right. If you go back and look at the coverage of this, of all these weeks, you would not be surprised about that verdict today at all. You wouldn't be surprised that it was fast. You wouldn't be surprised that maybe the jury asked those questions. We're not surprised because if you really followed it, this was the logical conclusion. And the community here probably are not surprised either because of the information, that was shared with the respect that we get to with the information, make our own decisions. And but it is really just Donald Trump said in the beginning that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. Well, today he didn't get away with it. And beyond the journalist in me, beyond the lawyer in me, I am just really satisfied as an American citizen that today he didn't get away with it.
I was looking at my text messages and I got, not making this up, over 300 messages from people saying that the sound was not on when I played that Fox clip with the people cheering in the background as the verdict is read. And the way it looks is no sound, Ben, no sound. I apologize. We're doing a lot at once here. So let me re-upload it right now so y'all can hear, and let me tell me if you hear the sound now. This was Fox reading the verdict while people were cheering in the background. So I apologize for that. Let's play the clip.
To let folks know, our producers inside say that the jury is back in the room, that Judge Merchan is back on the bench. And so we are looking now, it looks like we have some of the verdicts coming in. It is quickly coming in here. From inside, we are starting to hear that there are guilty verdicts. From our producer inside, we're hearing guilty on 1 through 5.
All right. Perhaps that was so satisfying, and because I'll say I screwed it up before, why don't I play that back one more time so y'all can hear people cheering in the background as Fox has to read the verdict. I'll do it one more time to make up for it. Here.
Let's do it, Ben.
To let folks know, our producers inside say that the jury is back in the room, that Judge Merchan is back on the bench. And so we are looking now, it looks like we have some of the verdicts coming in. It is quickly coming in here. From inside, we are starting to hear that there are guilty verdicts. From our producer inside, we're hearing guilty on 1 through 5.
Play it again. No, I'm not going to play it again.
I know we need that as our cell phone ring now.
Just the cheers.
Yes, guilty with the cheers in the background.
As Donald Trump would say, that's something I think I can inject in my veins, not bleach, but and I'm only joking about that. All right.
Yeah.
Here's the statement from the Biden-Harris campaign. Let's pull it up right now. This dropped moments ago. Biden-Harris campaign statement on today's verdict. Below is a statement from Biden-Harris 2024 Communications Director Michael Tyler on today's verdict. In New York today, we saw that no one is above the law. Donald Trump has always mistakenly believed he would never face consequences for breaking the law for his own personal gain. But today's verdict does not change the fact that the American people face a simple reality. There is still only one way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office, at the ballot box. Convicted felon or not, Trump will be the Republican nominee for president. The threat that Trump poses to our democracy has never been greater. He is running an increasingly unhinged campaign of revenge and retribution, pledging to be a dictator on day one and calling for our Constitution to be terminated so he can regain and keep power. A second Trump term means chaos, ripping away Americans' freedoms and fomenting political violence, and the American people will reject it this November. And I think Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's post was very powerful as well. If we have her post right there, and she states, "Whew, what did I say? Whew, whew." Few guilty on all counts in a state case. No, I can't make basic sounds, Dina. Guilty on all counts in a state case. I can do very dense legal reporting, but ask me to do pronunciations of very basic phrases. Unsuccessful. No matter what happens in November, he cannot undo this verdict. I know many are celebrating, and I get it, but my heart effing breaks for our country. How did we get here? When did we stop requiring some darn decency of the most powerful person on earth? The grand jurors, the prosecutors, the judge, the witnesses, and this jury deserve so much more than they will receive. This was a brave undertaking in an unnecessarily violent and politically charged America. FYI, today was a win for the rule of law. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene's response right here. It is an upside down flag, the insurrectionist symbol. That is what one of the main faces of the Republican Party is doing. The upside down flag that was in Alito's home and was there in the insurrection. That's what they're doing. We're joined by Michael Popak, Dina. I'm going to have you take it away just for a little bit as I hear my dogs Taquito and Chaquito in the background who need to go to the bathroom. And look, you don't get this type of coverage, folks, anywhere else, okay? And I want to remind everybody before I do that and pass it over to you both just for a little bit. Store.MeidasTouch.com. Get the gear that was talked about at the Trump criminal trial, where Donald Trump's lawyers tried to cross-examine Cohen and claim that Cohen owned the Midas Touch merch store, which he does not. But take a look at this gear, the Mar-a-Lardo Correctional Facility gear now. You can all wear it proudly. It's the official Mea Culpa podcast shirt right there. That's at store.MeidasTouch.com. I think we're close to selling out, so make sure you get yours now. 100% union made, 100% made in the U.S. We also have the Convict or Convict 45 shirts as well, which were talked about at the criminal trial. I mean, it's somewhat surreal that these things were talked about at the Trump criminal trial and that Midas Touch was repeatedly mentioned, but he was found guilty. So there you have it. Store.MeidasTouch.com for the Convict 45 gear. Everybody, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel. It is 100% free to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And you all may also be seeing those emojis on the bottom. If you hit that $ on the YouTube channel, that's one of the ways we fund this network. I know that like Fox and all these other corporate media networks are funded by like billionaires or decamillionaires. We've got the emojis, and we've got patreon.com/political beatdown, where we'll figure out when Michael Cohen will be able to have an exclusive meeting with you all. So that's patreon.com/political beatdown. We also have patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/legalaf. But to hear Cohen, that's patreon.com/political beatdown. I'm hearing that the suits are happy that I made those plugs. Also, make sure you subscribe to the Mea Culpa podcast, the Mea Culpa Blue podcast, the Political Beatdown podcast as well. Subscribe to this channel. There it is, Michael Cohen's Mea Culpa. It's the blue one, not the red one. Make sure you all are subscribed to the audio podcasts. And look, what I'm proud about is I'm so honored by this Midas Touch community out there, all the Midas Mighty, all the Beatdown Brigaders. And what I am also proud of is that we have hosts like Dina and Michael Popak and Karen Friedman-Agnifilo and Dave Arenberg and Sean Wu and others who are prosecutors and lawyers in the field who know this stuff well and who share the data and share the information. whether it's good or bad, and I think here, once again, we've pretty much hit the bullseye in our analysis every step of the way, even where our analysis differed dramatically from what corporate media was putting out there. I think we had been spot on, and that's because we followed the evidence, we followed the data. I'll be right back, everybody. Taquito and Chaquito, business is calling right there. Michael Popak, let me have you take it away.
We have to strap on our adult diapers when it comes to things related to Donald Trump. We can't leave our chairs for a minute. Dina and I were doing a hot take when the verdict came out. So a couple of things to pick up where Ben left off. I came back because we were still going strong, and we have new information and new data. Donald Trump said something just now. Is about the only thing I've ever agreed with him. Is that there is another verdict that's going to be on November 5 by the American people. And I agree with that. And I think that's there's actually something both sick and enlightening about that, and self-revelatory about that comment, because there is going to be a thumbs up and thumbs down. There is going to be another binary decision, just as I thought this was either 34-0 or 0-34 in the counts. That's how it played out. We have a binary decision about our democracy, about our constitutional republic on November the 5th. And I know that we've seen these pollings all pre-conviction, pre-Donald J. Trump convicted felon. So I think you have to have, that's the before, and now we have to have the after polling. But polling doesn't matter. What matters is actual voting at the polls, mail-in voting, early voting, voting at the poll at your precinct, and getting other people to the polls, just not yourself, but bringing 5 or 8 or 10 other people to the polls to vote against the kleptocracy and the restoration of the kleptocracy by the Donald Trump and the Trump crime family getting back into office. And even if only 0.5% or 1% of the people just can't hold their nose any longer and vote for Donald Trump and say, I just can't vote for a convicted felon. It's against every fiber of my being, then the right person, the reelection of Joe Biden will happen. And we can move on to other things on our various shows on the Midas Touch Network. Believe me, we got plenty to talk about regardless of who is the president. But of course, we're worried here about the constitutional republic. So that was one statement by Donald Trump. But the more important statement that came out after the trial, is the Judge Merchan saying when the sentencing is going to be. It's going to be in July. Not only did the American people deserve to know, thumbs up or thumbs down, whether a jury of Donald Trump's peers felt he was a felon or not, they deserved that before they went into the booth to vote. And they got it, at least in New York. I don't know about in D.C. with the Supreme Court. We're still waiting. Today was Supreme Court Opinion Day. They just couldn't get around to issuing the opinions that matter, like immunity. They got to issue one in favor of the National Rifle Association, the NRA. They got to issue ones about arbitration matter. That's not what we're waiting on. Come out with the one that matters, the immunity, and maybe we can get DC election interference case up and running before November as well. But we have that. That is now a data point for people to make their decision. July, we're going to have sentencing of Donald Trump with both sides, the defense and the prosecution, weighing in, and the judge applying New York law and his discretion as the trial judge to set an appropriate sentence that matches the crime. I don't care if 34 crimes. I don't care if there's an appeal or an emergency appeal. There's going to be a sentencing in July, and it's going to be up to this judge, and he's going to have to make the Solomonic decision about whether it is probation, whether it is jail time, whether it is a combination or a hybrid, whether it's home confinement, the shape and contours of all that in consultation with law enforcement, federal law enforcement, Secret Service, and the rest. And what does he do with a first-time offender like Donald Trump, one like we've never had before? Yes, it's a white-collar crime, as they call it. But is the message that Donald Trump gets a pass and gets probation, which some would in this circumstance, gets home confinement or gets jail time or some combination? On sentencing, which is going to be in July, Dina, what do you think is going to happen there? What do you think should happen, and what do you think will happen?
Okay, I'm going to get to your very good legal question there, but let's go back, rewind, because it's just too fun to talk about the verdict and what I think here about our earlier little how I wanted to bet you that the verdict was going to come today. I'm having a little bit of fun with that because having watched this and hearing the jury questions, I really felt like that verdict was going to come today. So we could kind of talk about that more offline. But anyway, so predictions. What do you think about that, Popok?
I don't
That
know.
was
We
kind
got,
of fun, right?
100,000 people who have no idea what we're talking about. So since it's been mentioned so many times, let me break it up. We were doing a hot
let's
take.
break it down.
And I said I thought this verdict, based on the questions and based on the process, was not going to come in until tomorrow at some time. And Dina said, I have a sixth sense. I think it's going to be now. And I said, yeah, I don't think so. Let's do our hot take and then we'll figure it out. And as soon as I was done with the note for the hot take, I mean, literally put a period on it and sent it to the team.
Right.
We got a message from the brothers that said verdict is in. And I also said, I only do one bet a year, and I already bet Karen Freeman and lost, and I'm not doing it again. But let's get to what matters here.
Yeah. And the reason, even though why I bring that up, is because it wasn't just that maybe I had a good gut. It was because if you followed the trial and you saw what the jury asked, they asked for that crux of the Trump Tower. They asked about the inference. They asked for all they needed. At that point, they were either going to say, I believe it or I don't believe it, right? That was kind of why I thought it was coming. And so kind of doing that same parsing through, guessing about the judge and the sentencing, it's the same idea. Instead of getting inside the juror's mind, getting inside the judge's mind. And I think we have heard enough from Judge Merchan to understand he doesn't want to put Donald Trump in jail. I mean, he let him violate the gag order 10 times without putting him in jail. He said the last time, I don't want to put a former president or future president in jail. I think we have to kind of listen to that. A typical criminal defendant would have been put in jail before that 10 times. I don't think Judge Merchan wants to jail Donald Trump. I don't think that's going to happen. So whether or not, like you said, there's a house arrest or probation, I don't know if people are necessarily going to feel like that was kind of enough of a consequence. But I think we have to accept the reality that he's not going to get jail time. For one, that kind of lower level felony doesn't usually get jail time in New York. And then Judge Merchan told us essentially that he doesn't want to do it. Rather than get disappointed about that, I think it almost doesn't matter in terms of the American public. As you said, the vote on November 5th, him being a felon is going to be attached to him, regardless of what that July sentencing is. And that does matter for the American public because most people aren't actually even paying that much attention, but they do care about food on their tables. They care about the healthcare. They care about the safety in their neighborhood. They care about sending their kids to college. That's what they care about. And they don't want so much chaos in the White House. They don't want this idea of what does that look like with a felon. And also, to be quite frank, I think there's enough patriotic people in this country still, both sides. When I say patriotic, I'm not saying Republican or MAGA. I'm saying like truly patriotic, where they want our president to be an aspirational figure. They want it to be somebody that is unattainable, that you look up to, that you think, this is a 1 in a million person. And a felon doesn't match that. And so I think he does peel off a whole section of voters today, regardless of July 11th. What do you think?
Yeah, we came around to the same point. I don't think he's going to jail. I'm not here to rain on anybody's or pee on anybody's cornflakes. In a way, I'm celebrating justice now, and I kind of want to. I'm looking at something in the chat. I kind of want to celebrate. I don't want to enjoy. Now, I don't want to enjoy because Donald Trump got convicted of something he wasn't guilty of. I want to enjoy that in my 33 years of legal career and being a trial lawyer, I've always trusted juries. And I've always trusted the jury process. Sure, I've lost cases I should have won, and I've won cases I should have lost. And any trial lawyer like me, worth his salt, will tell you the following. If you haven't lost the trial, you haven't tried enough of them. So it's not that like only wins or losses. It matters here, though, given as you said, we did follow closely the presentation of the evidence. There was 80 hours of trial time. There were 22 witnesses that went before this jury. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents. There was 9 hours of deliberation, and there was a 12-person thing called a jury. And as I said early on in Legal AF and in our analysis, jury science and my own experience teaches us that juries make their decision. They don't deliberate, but they make their individual decision relatively early on in the case. Opening statements, sometimes even before that, jury selection, opening statements, and certainly after the first witness. And all of that, voir dire, jury selection, how the prosecution handled it, how Todd Blanche handled it, which wasn't that great. Opening statements, which I thought were a win for the prosecution in how they built up sincerity, authenticity, and with the jury. And then, of course, delivered on it, ran a golden thread through this trial and pulled all the evidence through it. And we got that going on. And then in the first witness, I know it's a long time ago, it's 22 witnesses ago, but it's the witness that they wanted to hear from in right away of the 4 pieces of things they wanted to hear. David Pecker, witness number 1 for the prosecution. 2 days of David Pecker. Sure, he got a little bit cross-examined. They all do. But he stood strong and not only reinforced everything Michael Cohen, and since we're on a show, tip of the hat to Michael Cohen. Not everything Michael Cohen said was reinforced. Everything was reinforced by Pecker. But Pecker himself, in a way that only he, as a precipient witness with knowledge, knows what happened in the Trump Tower conspiracy, in his private phone calls with Donald Trump, in his conversations with Stormy Daniels, with the lawyers, and all of that, in a way that was really forthright and compelling. We said at the time, Dina, you might have said it on your own participation on this network too, that David Pecker was in a way, he had already made his peace with his involvement in the criminal conspiracy. And it was not like pulling teeth. When the prosecution team, I think it was Josh Steinglass, could have been Matt Colangelo, I'll figure it out here, asked him questions. It looked like David Pecker was having a cup of coffee with a friend of his. He turned to the jury. I love this. I always try to teach my witnesses to do this. Turn towards the jury, not in a way that's offensive. Don't stare at the jury. But when you're answering questions, try to speak to the jury, especially when you're on direct. He was so natural. He gave it up so quickly. He was so self-effacing. He so admitted to participation in the criminal conduct without labeling it criminal conduct, because he doesn't have to do that. That I said, oh, this is this. And we ran hot takes at the time. This is the first nail in the coffin of Donald Trump is David Pecker. And what did the jury want first? We want to replay the David Pecker testimony and nothing else. No questions, no what if, no hang up in there. And there was a lot of speculation by talking heads, legal talking heads, of which we count ourselves among them, in which they said, oh, we're worried about one of the jurors. Oh, that one juror. I'm not going to mention which one it is. I know which one it is. Oh, that one juror in seat number blank. That, that person's facial expressions. Oh, that person's always nodding their head. Doesn't seem to ever agree with the prosecution. I said, I think on midweek of Legal AF, I said, wait for the deliberation process. Let that person who may be harboring their own opinions become part of a collective and become part of this organogram of a jury process, which has a jury 4-person, which is in seat number 1, but also 2 lawyers, a civil litigator and a corporate lawyer sitting there as well, just as legal advisors, right? I mean, they're jurors, but come on, the jury's going to say, well, what do you think, Bill? It was 2 men. Just so you know. And look how quickly, Dina, this jury put aside any strife, any thought. They just had a couple of questions they needed resolved. And when I heard, and you and I heard about inferences, how do you apply? We know the facts, but what inferences are we allowed to draw from those facts? You and I looked at each other earlier today, and we were like, Trump is dead meat, because they're not asking inferences for things that the defense argued. The defense put on 2 witnesses. Let's remind everybody. One of them was a paralegal for one of the lawyers' law firms. Todd Blanche's own paralegal got up there in order to be a records custodian for phone calls between Michael Cohen and Bob Costello, who was allegedly his lawyer. They didn't care about that at all. They didn't even ask for the playback of Costello's testimony. They did not care about that witness. And then they put on Bob Costello because Donald Trump wanted them to. And they didn't care about that either. But there was no other evidence. It was all, and it's okay, it was defense by cross-examination. Again, I'm not trying to shift the burden. The defendant doesn't have to take the stand, is innocent until proven guilty, and doesn't have an obligation to put on any piece of evidence. They don't have an obligation to do an opening statement. They don't have an obligation to do a closing argument. Of course they do. So I'm not shifting the burden. I'm just saying, what if they're asking about inferences from facts, it has to be the prosecution's facts for inferences, not the defense, because there weren't any facts that were really presented.
The other thing that the jury did this morning that got me kind of excited and thinking they were going to convict was asking for the audio, because I've been talking about the tapes. You know, Nixon, and I'll say it again, Nixon, it brought him down was the tapes. Trump was brought down the tapes, having the jury hear it, and they wanted to hear it. That is so compelling. The prosecution must have been like jumping inside, knowing they wanted to hear Trump again, you know, talking about that payment, you know, validating that, yes, there was this conspiracy to catch and kill. But of all the strength of the prosecution case, which I've been talking about a lot on this live, the defense case was really weak. Like you were saying, Popok, and some of the statements in the closing were very clear that they were like driven by Donald Trump and didn't make any legal sense, because they made a lot of really overly broad statements that were not necessary to make and were so easily disproved. Like one of the things they said was that when the Access Hollywood tape was released, it was just another day for the campaign. They said that to the jury. First of all, the Hope Hicks, who was a very good witness, had testified that it was a crisis, but everybody in that jury box lived through that moment. Unlike other trials where they just had to get the experience of the witness, they lived through that. That was not another day for the campaign. Why would you say that? It doesn't actually really matter. It's not going to help you with an acquittal. You know, so why say it? Like that hurt them. They said that Donald Trump didn't have sex with Stormy Daniels in the closing. That didn't matter in this case. This was not a sexual assault case. It was not a sexual harassment case. Whether or not he actually had sex with her did not matter. What mattered was what the story was going to say. So why say it? Stormy Daniels was a very credible witness. The jury's going to have a disconnect between that statement and then her. Like, you don't want there to be so many disconnects. So the defense in their closing, I thought they also said every campaign is a conspiracy. Why say that? It sounds exactly like what a statement Donald Trump is going to say. These kind of like overly broad statements. That is not true. We know we live in this country. We know every campaign, you know, they're trying to imply that there's some sort of, you know, nefarious, everybody kind of like cheats their way like this. And why say it? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if everybody else does it. You're the one that got caught. I felt like the defense also lost this case. Yes, the prosecution had a very strong case, but the defense could have done a better job. And they didn't. I felt like they really lost it. And I would not want to be one of Donald Trump's lawyers right now, because getting blamed for this.
Yeah, I think is Ben back? Okay, got it. look at the production.
It's not.
Look, just to put sentencing in perspective, because I see a lot of people in the chat saying, well, if you do 4 years times 34 counts, it's 130. That's not going to go that way. Just to give some sort of perspective, Michael Cohen went to jail for 3 years. He got let out a little bit early. COVID impacted that, but he was sentenced to a federal set of crimes related to something similar for 3 years. And the speculation that we had based on, you know, past historical precedent of other people being sentenced for similar crimes, because we got to have it both. We got to play it straight here. If we're going to treat him like a garden variety criminal, which he is, and a convicted felon in New York for these crimes, then we have to treat him in the sentencing. Setting aside the gag order violations, he's got his own problem with the gag order violations that have not yet been resolved and could be tacked on to the sentence. And I certainly would be addressed by the judge at that time. I don't think he holds other hearings about the gag order and what could happen. This gag order is still in place all the way through sentencing, and it'll just be added on cumulatively. But the speculation was somewhere at most would be like a year, maybe 4 months to a year in prison, if that was the way that the judge was going to go, and or a combination of home confinement. He's a first-time offender. It's hard to believe Donald Trump's a first-time offender. He offends me every day, but he's a first-time offender when it comes to the criminal justice system. He doesn't have a prior record in that way. Things like the E. Jean Carroll sex assault, which was proven civilly, not criminally, don't count. And, so the question for the judges, and he's going to have his law clerks do the research, and the prosecution team will do it for him as well, which is what does somebody who committed these crimes where there's no dollar amount really involved, except for the election crime of the $130,000 in-kind illegal contribution, what does somebody get for that in the New York penal system? That's going to be weighing on the judge's mind. Maybe what others like Michael Cohen got, sure. As another point of reference, for his 17-count tax fraud conviction with minimal testimonial support, Alan Weisselberg got 5 months in Rikers Island, although he got out early because of COVID. And because of perjury, because he's a twice felon, Weisselberg got like another 5 months. So I'm just trying to give people sort of the range of times with this particular judge and all for things that amount to felonies. So, and I think good news, we're going to have not only Ben back, but I think he's going to have a special guest joining as well. And that'll be the moment where at least I jump off and do all that. But it's always a pleasure doing stuff with you, Dina. We're going to do more of our hot takes and things together as time goes on. And I think today was all the stars aligned.
Mm-hmm.
We were already on our microphones when this verdict hit for obvious reasons. So that's where we're at. And now that's what happened. But I think what people want to know is what's going to happen next. And that's why we're talking about the sentencing. And then the impact, I think that's where Ben and his special guests are going to come in, is the impact on the electoral results and on the electorate of now having to defend criminal felon convicted Donald J. Trump as the Republican nominee. And how does that impact people? It has an impact, not to the blood red MAGA who will vote for him regardless, the cult followers. I'm not talking about them. There's always a base that'll vote for whoever is the nominee, let alone Donald Trump. We're talking about the independents, or the ones, if you can believe it, who haven't made up their mind. And then how this will impact it. And the polling, while interesting to me to be consistent, because I still don't believe the polling this far out, especially on these issues. And it is an electoral vote, battleground state issue, not a popular vote issue. So the issue on that is how much this felony conviction, there's no way to spin it. He lost 34 counts to a jury. And if you do the math, there's never been a jury that Donald Trump's been in front of that he's ever been successful. He lost 9-0 to E. Jean Carroll in the rape and defamation case a year ago. He lost 9-0 to E. Jean Carroll a second time. That's 18-0. He lost 17-0 in a state court conviction for two of his companies for tax fraud brought by this Manhattan DA, and that was 12 jurors. So we've got 9, 9, 12, and now another new 12 jurors in a state just convicted him of 34 counts. So you've got 12, 12, 18, 24. You got 32 jurors to 0 have found against Donald Trump from the beginning, and then add all the grand jurors and all the special purpose grand jurors. He's like 70 and 0-70 for jurors every time he gets inside of the wood paneling of a courtroom, whether he testifies or not, no matter what the combination of lawyers there is, whether he does his own closing argument, he loses. $465 million New York Attorney General case. Over $100 million now owed with interest running to E. Jean Carroll, right? Here lost 34 felony counts, 17 felony counts a year ago, 2 years ago against his companies. Indicted in Georgia, indicted in Florida, indicted in the District of Columbia, convicted now in New York. I mean, I don't know what it takes, not our audience, but I don't know what it takes the rest of the electorate. That's like, what fence are you on? And how could you still be up it at this point about, and if you're going to vote, then know that you're voting for a convicted felon. And it's not because Merchan's daughter works for a political fundraising company in Chicago. It's not because Judge Merchan, who until he became this presiding judge, had an unassailable, unimpeachable record as a jurist until he became Donald Trump's jurist. Ben, you're back. Welcome back.
I'm back, and I want to bring in our next guest, Ron Filipkowski, editor-in-chief at the Midas Touch Network. Ron Filipkowski is also a former federal prosecutor. Ron Filipkowski was a Republican as well, and we are so honored to have Ron Filipkowski leading all of our editorial at MidasTouch.com and the MidasNews.com website. And Ron, good to see you here. And so, Ron, you've been following this trial very, very closely. You've also, been looking into issues also like, given that Donald Trump is now a convicted felon, will he even be able to vote? Let's get into some of those granular issues a little bit later, but let's just start off with your reaction, Ron. And one of the things that Ron does, as you all know, is he really follows what's going on in MAGA world, how they're reacting to this as well. So what's your reaction and what's their reaction?
Yeah, I just actually got done watching Kim Guilfoyle's podcast and Donald Trump Jr.'s podcast. So I wanted to, those are a couple, and I just read Eric's tweet. So that was also, Eric predicted that his dad just won the election today. So there you go. They're always winning, right? They never seem to win, but they always say they're winning. But yeah, I mean, obviously a historic day. I mean, even the Fox poll, I saw the Fox poll this week as far as like what percentage of voters said that they would change their vote from what they were currently leaning towards. It was 17%. That's a Fox poll. That's a seismic number, in a close election. 70% is a lot of votes. Yeah, I think it's obviously we don't know if he's going to go to jail either. I don't think so. I mean, I think that most likely he's going to get probation. But the other thing is his sentencing date is 4 days before the Republican National Convention. 4 days before. So that's going to be interesting too. He'll be a felon on probation at the Republican National Convention.
It'll be interesting to see what Justice Merchan does on sentencing. And it'll be interesting to see the sentencing memos that are submitted by each side. I'll just say this, any criminal defense lawyer or former prosecutor in New York will tell you that the usual course, though, of a felony conviction is that the criminal defendant would basically be remanded into custody right away. Right, Ron? I mean, that's usually, if you're guilty of a felony, there's usually a fairly quick remand in a situation. You're cuffed right there. So, but look, Justice Merchan is a law and order judge. Donald Trump has been held in contempt and violating the gag order over 10 times. I think there were numerous other violations that the prosecutors just simply did not bring up because they thought it would just delay the trial. So there's all this other conduct that I think they bring up in these sentencing memos. And Justice Merchan can sentence Donald Trump to several years in prison. Of course, there will be complicated aspects of that. The Secret Service is going to be there. He's obviously not going to be in general population, but where would you put him? But Justice Merchan is a law and order, no nonsense judge. He's not going to, I think, just give Donald Trump a slap on the wrist. Like, I think that sentencing is going to be a big moment where he also it's a whole different game at this point. I mean, Trump's a convicted felon. That has other implications here because you're not just dealing with Mr. Trump, not President Trump. You're not just dealing with Mr. Trump. You're dealing with convicted felon Donald Trump. And that's convicted felon Donald Trump before the Supreme Court. That's convicted felon Donald Trump involved in all of these cases. That's what goes before his name now. And maybe talk about that, Ron, how this impacts perhaps the other cases and how this has a domino effect just in other areas.
Yeah, well, to touch on your other point too for a second, as far as Mershon goes, I mean, obviously we have a very unusual situation that I, as a practicing criminal lawyer for 29 years, I did close to 300 criminal jury trials. I have never had a case where my client attacked the judge the entire time, every single day, and his family. I've never had a client do that before. So now this defendant has to be sentenced by a judge who he has been personally attacking, which simply never happens in the criminal justice system. Never happens. So he will not, I got to get my cat down here. He will not be able to say that he's factoring that in. He can't go in there and say, you know, I'm giving you jail time because you personally attacked me. But that has to be in his mind. He's a human being. The gag order violations he can use as an aggravating factor. And the other factor is this: typically when people are convicted, they will come to their sentencing hearing and have some remorse and accept some responsibility and apologize. Obviously, we know Donald Trump is not going to do that either. So where's the mitigation? You know, I'm not sure where it is.
Dina, orange is the new orange. As a friend of mine just told me, orange is the new orange. I like that. I'll wordsmith that a little bit. I want to remind everybody, store.meidastouch.com. Get the gear that was talked about in the trial. This is actually a trial exhibit. I'm not making that up. Cohen was cross-examined on the Mar-a-Lardo Correctional Facility shirts at store.meidastouch.com. Get yours now. Make sure you get the real ones on meidastouch.com, not the copycat ones, the real exhibit right there. Also, the Convict or now Convict 45 shirts. It's now Convict 45 at store.meidastouch.com. Also, make sure you check out MeidasNews.com, MeidasTouch.com for all of Ron Filipkowski's great reporting. Ron, I hope you'll stick around with us just a little bit more as well. Dina, I want to hear from you. What do you think about everything that Ron says? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think, Ron, I'm sorry you had to watch those podcasts. Thankfully, it was you and not me. It's really hard to hear those things these days. And the 17%, I mean, it's huge. Campaigns are won and lost by the people on the outside, right? Not the outside, but like the outer edges, because your core supporters are going to vote. Some people will always vote for who the nominee of that party is. That's not how elections are won and lost. And I do think there's people in this country that want the president to be aspirational. They don't want to tell their child that they just voted for a convicted felon for president. This is going to matter. And he's going to disparage our justice system between now and November. And there are going to be people that get turned off by that. And the last thing you need to do is like peel the onion from your coalition. You don't want to peel off supporters. I don't see how he really adds supporters to this. He's already told the people who believe our country is really a third world country and is really out of whack, and they believe that after the fake election thing. He's not adding people to that. So I think he's actually peeling people off. But regardless, like just the fact that 12 people were willing to take the action and to be so brave, to make him finally have the consequences to his action. I think that clip that you kept playing earlier, Ben, with the people cheering in the background on Fox News, I think that's almost one of the most powerful things that you can do against Trump, because he's kind of like this fake balloon, right? That you just need to pierce and let out the air. Like it's all a lot of talk. And, he says everybody loves him. And so people love him for that. So when you hear people cheering for that felony, you start to take away that mysticism that he has somehow built around him. That's how you beat him in November. These 12 jurors did that today. They put him down to right size. They didn't say you're so important that you are above the law. That's, I think, the beginning of really, turning him into the person who he is, which is just another corrupt guy who has cheated his way, throughout his whole life.
Great point, Dina. What I love about YouTube and Ron and some of these social media platforms, perhaps other than the ones run by Elon Musk, is that they're democratized platforms. So people get to vote with what they're viewing. It's not like cable where people control the distribution. So the fact that the Midas Touch network has been and is the #1 most viewed on digital for Trump criminal trial coverage, I think says a lot about where people are going, where people's minds are, and how upset people are when corporate media pushes these Trump bogus narratives that being convicted or indicted is a good thing. And you see Donald Trump and all of his right-wing MAGAs are trying to push that right now. This was a great day for them. This is what they wanted. He wanted to be convicted of making hush money payments to porn stars and falsifying business records while his wife was pregnant to cover that up, or just given like this is what they want in a Republican candidate. And it's important, this moment, not just for accountability for Donald Trump, which has occurred, but accountability for the media. This is a moment where I think people are saying enough of that crap. Tell us the truth. Stop spinning Trump narratives. This is despicable conduct that he engaged in. And someone who's in a position of leadership for any major American political party should not be engaged in this type of behavior. It should be disqualifying. Look, just take a look. I just took a look at my feed and my timeline, and this is what just showed up. You have Don Jr. saying such bullshit. That's his response. Such bullshit that a fair and impartial jury convicted his father. Such bullshit, he says. And then, Ron, you point out what MAGA Republican Rep Mike Collins says. Time for red state AGs and DAs to get busy. So they're saying, let's try to now come up with, false ways to prosecute Democrats or false ways to prosecute President Biden because Donald Trump correctly was convicted of actual crimes that have taken place. And this just goes to show you the lawlessness of the Republican Party. Then you have from Republican, not a MAGA, but Republican John Bolton, who's appeared here on the Midas Touch Network. The fact that I've interviewed John Bolton, let me be clear, and have found areas of agreement with John Bolton on areas of law and order. If you asked me 4 years ago if I thought that was ever possible, I would tell you that it'd be more possible that I would start a media network that would be leading YouTube coverage than interviewing John Bolton and finding areas of agreement. But here we are. John Bolton goes, today's verdict is a fire bell in the night. The Republican Party now has one last chance to change course and not nominate a convicted felon for president. And look, Ron, you used to be a Republican, used to be a leader, where you lived. The decay, the lawlessness. What do you make of all of this?
Yeah, you made a lot of great points there. I mean, first of all, the coverage, CNN. We've been listening to CNN analysts for a month tell us that Trump was going to win this trial. That they had no case and this was garbage. So, I mean, a lot of people turned off their network because of what they were hearing night after night from multiple analysts and hosts. I don't know what they were watching, because what I was hearing from them didn't bear any resemblance to what I was hearing from the trial. So that's number one. But number two, the Republican Party, I think we're seeing why DeSantis wanted a few delegates to be at that convention, and why he has not been photographed with Donald Trump at all in 2 years. They apparently had one meeting, but he wouldn't allow photographs. And Trump wanted that meeting photographed. And there's a reason for this. He wants Trump's voters, but he doesn't want the stain that he foresaw this. He doesn't want the stain of it. And why Nikki Haley stayed in as long as she did, because I think everybody thought all these maneuvers that Haley's doing, her trip to Israel, this and that the point of that was she's trying to angle to be Trump's running mate. I don't think so. I think what she was angling for is this moment right now when, Republicans are going to be doing some soul searching as far as what they want to do at their nominating convention, which happens to be days after Trump's sentencing when he could be in jail.
Absolutely. And Dina, how about some of these corporate media figures who just got it so absolutely wrong? And people who, before I saw their takes, I was surprised. I really was. I mean, Ari Melber, someone who, I really used to enjoy his takes, but Ari Melber seemed to have this grudge against Michael Cohen, and anything that Cohen did, Ari Melber used it as an opportunity to attack Cohen. It seemed just because he didn't like Cohen, right? Melber had Avenatti on the show once, and then Cohen was like, why would you do that? And then Melber took a personal offense to that. And then so Melber pushed this narrative along with Anderson Cooper at CNN and Eli Honig at CNN that Cohen's testimony was a disaster. They quite literally pushed a false narrative from people who I liked. And I'm like, if you're doing this, I've lost all hope in corporate media, because these were people who I really respected their reporting. And here's the thing, Dina and Ron, we had people in the courtroom, sometimes a dozen or so people who were either affiliated with the Midas Touch Network or were giving us insight depending on the time. And none of what they were saying was what was happening. It reminds me of when special counsel Jack Smith was appointed, and then there were all the narratives that's the worst, Jack Smith's the worst. And we're like, what are you even basing that on? Let's have Karen Friedman-Agnifilo, who worked with Jack Smith, tell us if that's the worst that Jack Smith's being appointed. So there was so much of that here that now that this verdict hit, Dina, you said it best, that this is going to come as a surprise to people because the coverage has been that awful. And look, I don't love using this platform to whine about the media. The media sucks. The media sucks. Everybody knows that. That's why everybody's watching this here. But I do think, and Ron, with the coverage that we do at MidasNews.com and at MidasTouch.com, the coverage that we do a lot is to call out the media sometimes as much as we're calling out Trump and what MAGA's doing, because they're working collectively to spread this disinformation. And that's a real problem. Dina, let me hear from you. Then Ron, I'll hear from you. And then Ron, I know you got to go back to all the great editorial work you're doing. But Dina, can you comment on that piece of it, though, that I remember everybody here remembers that. Cohen's on cross-examination, it was a disaster, a Perry Mason moment from Todd Blanche. Just false. And they tried to jam that down the American public's throats. It's terrible.
Mm-hmm. I remember we jumped on Political Beatdown right after that happened, and you had that insight about that Ari Melber and having a personal connection, and it made so much sense because watching it, I did not see it, and you did not see it as any gotcha moment. For one, that phone call wasn't that important. After that, they were reporting that, I went back and read that opening statement, and it wasn't even mentioned there. So it was so obviously not what they were making it out to be. And I have, to be totally, transparent, I comment on networks too, and I say the same thing. I even if the other co-host doesn't say it with me, the other narrative was this idea that the cross-examination showing Michael Cohen is angry was somehow effective. I thought that was ridiculous. I thought, well, of course he's going to be angry. He's the only one who went to jail from this conspiracy. I would be angry. He really suffered the consequence. And sure enough, the prosecution, their closing, they addressed it. They were like, yeah, he was angry because he paid the price. Done. Check mark. That was done. And I think that maybe this lesson is I think that we're going to see more trials. I don't, we don't know. We can hope and we can vote, but I don't think Trump is going to win in November, which means that more trials were to come. And I think those need to be televised. Yes, federal courts are not usually televised. That doesn't mean they can't make an exception. I think one of the reasons why this country is not prepared is it was really hard to follow the coverage. You had to be really committed. You had to follow those tweets for the reporters on the inside, or you were hearing it from certain legal analysts, which was really just their opinion of it. It really bothered me when I was like, this is what I thought was the most important. Well, I want to see what I think is important. I wish Jack Smith would support the idea of allowing cameras. I think this country needs to be able to see and evaluate themselves. Will Trump make it a circus? Maybe. He makes it a circus anyway. But that way, people can take it away themselves. I think it's harder to lie about what happened. It would have been impossible to lie about the impartiality of Justice Merchan if there were cameras in that courtroom. Yes, people can go read the transcripts. Go read the transcripts. Google them. They're all over the place. But it's hard to read transcripts. So let's bring the cameras in. Let's make that be the exception for how to treat a former president, not by giving him a lighter sentence, not by letting him violate the gag order, but by making it more accessible. Our courts are meant to be public. In a case like this, let them truly be public.
Ron, I want to hear from you before you get back to all the work you're doing at MeidasNews.com. Put this moment in context right now. I mean, you've been covering politics for a long time. You lead our incredible team of researchers and editorial staff, also made possible with everybody's Patreon and the emojis and all of that help us build this incredible network and the incredible team that you, Ron, lead here. Remind you, it's patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Also sign up for MeidasTouch.com/newsletter. Also patreon.com/Political Beatdown for the Cohen Patreon. That's patreon.com/Political Beatdown and patreon.com/MeidasTouch. But Ron, put this into context for us, this historical moment right now, May 30th, 2024, evening on the East Coast. Donald Trump convicted on 34 felony counts after a 7-week trial, about 12 hours of deliberation by this jury. They asked for a lot of thoughtful information. They did the job of what we expect of a jury. That's a significant deliberation time period. What do you make of it all?
Yeah. Well, before I answer that, let me just take 1 minute to kind of give a take on this that I haven't really heard from anybody else yet or seen, which is Trump testifying. I mean, in most criminal trials, it is a bad idea for the defendant to testify, but there are many criminal cases where it's a very good idea. In fact, it's almost essential that a defendant testify. What scenarios are those? When only that person, only the defendant, only your client can testify about certain things or has knowledge about certain things, and there's no other way to get that his side of the story in, and it's critical that it come in a situation like this, in a case like this. The defendant, to me, really should testify, because you have the critical things: whether he had sex with Stormy, what happened in the hotel room, what happened in his conversations with Cohen, 99.9% of which were not recorded or anything, and nobody else was present. It was only Trump and Cohen. What were those conversations? What did Trump tell Weisselberg? There was multiple points where Donald Trump could have gotten into a credibility contest with Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, who are not the clean witnesses. But the problem is, there's two problems. Donald Trump has absolutely no credibility whatsoever. He's a habitual liar. And the other problem is, he's on record. He can't shut his mouth up. So he had already committed to so many different stories on social media and in interviews. Instead of not talking about this case, which is a smart thing to do, he talked about it constantly. So all of those things could have been used to impeach him and destroy his credibility. So if you had any normal defendant who is capable of testifying in a truthful way and in a persuasive way, this is a case where it would have made perfect sense to call that client as a witness. But they can't do it because of Donald Trump is so stupid and has such bad judgment and is such a habitual liar. But the third reason why they couldn't do it is he is a coward. Fundamentally, he is a coward. He is fake tough, but deep down, he always shies away from contact. This is a man who has been involved in over 4,200 lawsuits as either a plaintiff or defendant, and he never testifies ever in any of them. But he always says he's going to, and then never does, because he's a coward. He's afraid. He always wants other people to fight his battles for him. Saw that on J6. You know, he sent the mob to the Capitol while he went back to the White House and watched it on TV. Fundamentally, the man is a coward. So as I just wanted to wrap that up the trial, but the perspective, obviously, we've never had anything like this happen in the history of the United States. And the unfortunate part is that so many in the Republican Party, instead of taking this moment like they should have in 2020, after January 6th in 2021, to reflect and to soul search and to course correct, they didn't do that. They doubled down. Now they have the second moment. So they had two moments in history to get off they had three moments to get off the Trump train. Really, you know, Access Hollywood could have bailed them out, but really they had two. January 6th. And what happened? Kevin McCarthy went down to Mar-a-Lago, and that was the turning point to where Trump could move forward as the leader of the party. Now they have another moment. What will they do? Will they triple down, quadruple down? And I'm not talking about the cultists. I'm talking about the Mitch McConnells and the Mike Johnsons. What are they going to do? Are they going to double down and defend this guy no matter come hell or high water and just follow him off the cliff? Or are they going to have a soul-searching moment to say, we need to get off this train?
Ron Filipkowski, thank you for leading our editorial team at MeidasTouch.com. At MeidasNews.com is actually the new one, MeidasNews.com, but the same thing as MeidasTouch.com. We appreciate you, and you've been spot on, and thank you for all you do, Ron.
Okay, thanks for the invite.
And to Ron's point there, Dina, that's why I think there's almost no chance that Donald Trump is going to debate. I think he's going to use this as an excuse about why he's not going to debate. I think it's just a matter of time before he kind of chickens out there. He'll come out with excuse after excuse. We also have Congressman Jared Moskowitz is going to be joining us shortly as well. I always love when Congressmember Moskowitz is on the program. Dina, you have a few more minutes, though, to go over this verdict sheet together, or you got to go?
I have to go, unfortunately, but I'm just so grateful that we were able to break this together on, as you say, Michael Cohen's Political Beatdown. Definitely was karmic in that way. And I'm grateful to be a part of this community. And I'm really grateful that those 12 jurors had the bravery to see the evidence and to make Trump face the consequences of his actions. So it has just been an honor to talk this last hour or so about really this historic day that I think none of us will ever forget.
Well, Dina, it was great to co-host this with you. It's been an honor co-hosting all of these political beatdowns with you. And we're excited to launch a Dina show that you and I are discussing, and we will be announcing that soon. So Dina Dahl, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Want to remind everybody as well about another show that we just launched. It's called Mistrial, and it's led by Karen Friedman Agnifilo. They do an incredible job there over at Mistrial. The first episode was last night. Three of the former kind of top female prosecutors who break down the news and break down all of the legal issues in a very kind of basic common sense way, and drawing on, these are the most experienced prosecutors out there. Their debut show was absolutely amazing. Let's pull up the verdict sheet right here. Get your screenshots ready, because you should get a screenshot of this with the Political Beatdown background right there. We've got, this is the official verdict sheet in the people of the state of New York v. Donald J. Trump. You see Justice Juan Merchan right there, and you'll see each of the 34 there. Guilty, 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 guilty. And there you have it. You see right there, it's signed by Joshua Steinglass, the ADA, the district attorney who did the closing arguments. You see it was signed below DC's defense counsel by Emile Bove right there. I think we have Donald Trump's, well, let's take a look at the presser from Alvin Bragg first from moments ago. Here is the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, in a little bit. I think we have that in a little bit. I'll ask my team when we have that. I'm speaking to my team right now. Do we have Donald? The presser is going to be taking place in a little bit. We'll bring that to you. We'll bring that to you live as soon as Alvin Bragg speaks. We have Democratic Congressmember Jared Moskowitz giving you his reaction as well in the next 10, 15 minutes or so, and maybe some other surprise guests are going to be joining as well. We do have Donald Trump's response, I believe, and we have the video of Donald Trump leaving the courthouse. Let's play this for you. This is Donald Trump, or I should say convicted felon Trump right here. Let's play the video.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. But the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man, and it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end, and we'll win, because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now from prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists, and they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble. But this was a rigged decision right from day one, with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case, never. And we will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
Why should voters vote for a convicted felon?
First ever former American president to become a convicted felon.
You know, basically everything that Donald Trump said there, completely and totally false. We have Alvin Bragg right now. Let's zoom in right there. Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney who just secured the conviction of Donald Trump, is getting ready to speak. Let's zoom in and hear what Alvin Bragg has to say.
The jury, for its service, jurors perform a fundamental civic duty. Their service is literally the cornerstone of our judicial system. We should all be thankful for the careful attention that this jury paid to the evidence and the law, and their time and commitment over these past several weeks. 12 everyday New Yorkers, and of course, our alternates, heard testimony from 22 witnesses, including former and current employees of the defendant, media executives, book publishers, custodians of records, and others. They reviewed call logs, text messages, and emails. They heard recordings. They saw checks and invoices, bank statements, and calendar appointments. This type of white-collar prosecution is core to what we do at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. In the 1930s, District Attorney Thomas Dewey ushered in the era of the modern, independent professional prosecutor. For now nearly 90 years, dedicated professionals in this office have built upon that fine tradition. A major part of our practice during that nearly 90 years has been public integrity work, including cases involving jurists, local and state electeds, public servants, and others. I want to thank this phenomenal prosecution team, embodying the finest traditions of this office: professionalism, integrity, dedication, and service. They are model public servants, and I am proud and humbled to serve side by side with them. The 12 everyday jurors vowed to make a decision based on the evidence and the law, and the evidence and the law alone. Their deliberations led them to a unanimous conclusion beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, Donald J. Trump, is guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree to conceal a scheme to corrupt the 2016 election. And while this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors, by following the facts and the law and doing so without fear or favor. I want to conclude by expressing deep gratitude to the NYPD and the officers of the Office of Court Administration for securing the courthouse, all of our safety, making sure the courthouse and all of the other matters that are important in their own right continued seamlessly. They will continue to be and have always been incredible partners. Thank you.
And do you plan to request a prison sentence? That Donald Trump's multiple violations of the gag order that was in place should factor into that request at all?
The judge scheduled a sentencing for July 11th. We will speak in court in that time. He also set a motion schedule. We will speak in our court filings as we've done throughout this proceeding.
Donald Trump has repeatedly targeted you personally and members of your prosecution team. Do you have a response to the former president after this trial is concluded?
I do not.
In February, you decided not to bring a case against Donald Trump. You criticized them. You criticized what you embedded him in March 2023. You criticized when people really started to understand that case. How do you think of all that now, seeing the results of that? Can you kind of put that in context of your personal history?
I did my job. Our job is to follow the facts and the law without fear or favor. And that's exactly what we did here. And what I feel is just gratitude to work alongside phenomenal public servants who do that each and every day in matters that you all write about and make the press, and in lots of matters that you don't. I did my job. We did our job. Many voices out there. The only voice that matters is the voice of the jury, and the jury has spoken.
Last, Mr. Steinglass, many people said the prosecution was masterful and flawless. Just want to know how you feel at this moment. Sorry. How do you feel?
Mr. Steinglass, I think some of you probably saw him speak for a little bit the other day. So he's done his job, as has this team. And he just told me, tell him how I feel. I think you said that. I will just say enormous gratitude. You know, our system, I talk about the jurors at the beginning of my remarks. We have a phenomenal system. 12 everyday New Yorkers. They listen to the judge's directions. They follow the evidence. You saw them in court every day. They were careful and attentive. And so I feel deep gratitude to work alongside them, to be a part of this system. And I just want to echo that this is what we're doing every single day. I mean, during this trial, just this week, right, a ghost gun indictment, Grimaldi's wage theft plea resolution, sex crimes, convictions, all sorts of work that's being done by phenomenal public servants. So we're before you today on this obviously consequential matter, but this is what we do every day. We follow the facts and the law without fear or favor.
If a jail sentence is in the cards, it is likely that Trump and his attorneys would seek a stay on enforcement of that sentence pending appeal. If that were the scenario, would your office object to staying the sentence?
I'm going to let our words in court speak for themselves when we get to the sentencing matter. I'm not going to address hypotheticals. They raise arguments, we'll respond. And I think your question really underscores an important point. This is an active, ongoing matter, right? We have other phases of this going ahead. We will continue to do our speaking about this matter, about issues like that in court.
From day one, kind of the viability of this case has been questioned in all sorts of media outlets, all over the place, including from the defendant himself. Can you respond to any of that? How you feel now that you've gotten the conviction?
So my response again is I did my job. And I think particularly I talked about the history of the office. My personal history, I started as a prosecutor in 2003 in the Public Integrity Unit in the New York State Attorney General's office. I served also in the Public Integrity Unit in the Southern District of New York. These are kind of cases I've done personally, and it's a hallmark of the tradition of this office that I'm proud to lead. And I don't want to go into the whole body of litigation, but we now have a federal court decision ruling on the legal theories. We had a state court decision on the omnibus motions. But most importantly, today, we have the most important voice of all, and that's the voice of the jurors. They have spoken. Donald J. Trump has been convicted of 34 counts of falsifying business records. Thank you.
District Attorney, your office has been investigating this case since
Are you concerned about retribution if Trump is elected president?
You went to the Supreme Court twice.
Donald Trump, guilty. We're joined by Anthony Davis, co-host here at the Midas Touch Network. In just a few moments, we'll also be joined by Congressmember Jared Moskowitz to get his reaction. Anthony, I want to get your reaction to this historical day in American history and world history.
Well, it's about time, Ben, isn't it? I mean, I think that's really where I would start with this, because we've all been covering this, we've all been talking about it, we've all been speculating, but ultimately these decisions come down to juries, regular people from American society, New Yorkers in this case, who gave their judgment and felt that the evidence was compelling. And that's really what this is all about. It's about the evidence. It's not about a witch hunt or a kangaroo court. I mean, I was just thinking just then, listening to Alvin Bragg, he is so smart, he is so measured, he is so respectful of the law and understanding of the law. And Donald Trump paints this kind of parallel universe where the Democrats are these axe-wielding crazies who are just trying to persecute him, and it couldn't be further from the truth. And I think sometimes we forget that behind the scenes are methodical lawyers. experienced people who understand the law and try and keep people like Donald Trump from breaking it. And, you know, Trump's been going his whole life breaking the law, doing things on his terms. And the day that he became president the first time, in 2017, was the day that his personal affairs became of public interest. That was the moment when suddenly his business was our business, and he can't continue like that.
Anthony, I want to show you some of the magazine covers that will be dropping soon. We have the cover of the New Yorker right here. This is the cover of next week's New Yorker. You see Donald Trump's little tiny hands right there in the handcuffs. They may need to make smaller handcuffs. Time magazine, here's the cover. I think we've got that one too. I'll show you in just a few moments. But look, now we're going to have kind of the right-wing propaganda media trying to make it seem like this was a good thing, that this was the outcome that they desired, that this is helpful to him in November, that this is what he always wanted, to be convicted of 34 felony counts for making hush money payments and falsifying business records. The same corporate media that's fed us these bogus narratives over and over again that originate from right-wing propaganda media. We already see that starting right now. What do you think, Anthony, the American people need to know, though? Because this is a moment of accountability for Trump, but I think this is a moment where we, the people, need to also reclaim our power and our voice back from these other forces of corporate media out there that tried to push these bogus narratives even throughout this trial over and over again. So how do we take our voices back, Anthony?
I think we need to remember that life goes on without corporate media. And, you know, sometimes people say to me, you know, what news do you watch? And I don't watch the news. I literally never, ever have the news on because I know that it is over dramatic, you know, no matter what network you're watching. And it is not a place where I feel that it's not a place that I want to exist in because I feel maybe it's just too much stress on my heart, you know, and they make their money out of keeping people scared and fear. And, you know, the left-leaning media can be sometimes as guilty as the far-right media as well, which, and I'm talking about Fox and Newsmax and One America and all of those. And there's many of them. Don't think it's just those three. If you search the EPG, you'll find a whole bunch of these networks. And unfortunately, they support each other. They all run with the same narrative, and then people on the right, they go looking, and then they find that the same story is corroborated on another channel. They think, well, it must be true. But the reality is you can come here to people like us, independent journalists, without any kind of corporate money involved, and you can hear us just talking about the facts in very simple and plain English, with no drama and no countdown clock in the corner to doomsday. And I think that that's important because America is not as crazy and is not as polarized and divided as the news media would like us to think it is. I actually think that people on the left and the right are remarkably similar when it comes to their views. And when you look at the national polling on things like abortion or on gun safety legislation, people invariably are for all of these things. They really want people to have the freedom, to the right to choose in the case of women's health care. And when it comes to, you know, weapons of war, they want them off the streets and they want gun safety legislation. And most people agree on that. The people that don't agree on that are the lawmakers, the far-right lawmakers, the Maga Republicans, who are in cahoots, as we know. Trump making his late-night phone calls to Laura Ingham or to Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson when he was at Fox, and telling them what he wants them to say, right? And he even did it during this trial, as we know, trying to circumnavigate the gag order by getting his friends on Fox to say the stuff that he wasn't allowed to. And so, yeah, the whole thing is a setup. It really is. And it's time that people wake up and recognize that actually humanity needs to win out. The rule of law and humanity, not people taking sides or being part of a political organization by default.
Anthony Davis, I want you to stay with us if you can. I want to bring on Congress member Jared Moskowitz live Congressmember Moskowitz, you're live right now on the Midas Touch Network. This is part of our continuing live coverage where we were able to break the news that Donald Trump was convicted on all 34 felony counts arising out of the criminal trial. Would love to get your first reaction to it.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me. Look, I think you can have mutually exclusive reactions. I think the first reaction is no one really, I think, should be taking joy in the fact that a former president has just been was indicted and then found guilty, right? I mean, this is the first time in American history we have a former president found guilty. So it's not a good day for America. That being said, the other part I said, it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive, is that if you believe in the rule of law and you believe in the American justice system and you believe in the fact that the way we find people innocent or guilty or by a jury of our peers in our country, then at the end of the day, you have to respect the will of the jury. And that is they found him guilty. It wasn't the judge that found him guilty. It wasn't a political opponent who found him guilty. It was jurors, 12 jurors who sat there and listened day in and day out and looked at the evidence, asked for some of that to be sent to the jury room as they deliberated. Took 2 days, wasn't a snap decision, and unanimously determined that he was guilty of the charges. So, that's my first reaction. Ben, I'm a glass half full guy. And so I guess if there's one silver lining for the former president is he no longer has to deal with the trauma of that courtroom of it being too cold for him. He doesn't have to be there anymore. So he doesn't have to deal with that. He doesn't have to wear his sweater anymore. So he'd been complaining it was chilly, and now the trauma of that is over for the former president.
I want to show you this. Marjorie Taylor Greene and other MAGA Republicans are posting things like this. An upside down flag, one of the symbols of the insurrectionists. And of course, we know the story about Justice Alito blaming his wife for hanging that upside down flag that we saw at the insurrection. You also have MAGA Republicans like Mike Collins saying, time for red state AGs and DAs to get busy. These are Republican Congress members who are technically your colleagues doing the exact opposite of law and order right now. What's your reaction to that, Congressman?
Well, look, if Marjorie doesn't want to stay in Congress, I don't want to start something, but she can leave. She doesn't have to be there. If she's not happy or proud of the country, if she wants to hang the American flag upside down, you don't have to serve in Congress, Marjorie. You could go back to Georgia, right, and do more workout videos and post those all day. You don't have to represent the American people in the people's house. And so, look, Ben, we're going to see a lot of this over the next couple of days, weeks, months. Their mentality, of course, and this is what they've learned from Trump, is that if we're not always winning, then it's rigged or it's a fraud, right? If we win the election, then everything that night went swimmingly. If we lose the election, rigged, fraud. If he had won this case, he would stop saying rigged and fraud. If now that he lost, it's rigged and it's fraud, right? Trump's somebody who, if he played baseball and he got, up at the plate and he struck out 3 times in front of our eyes, would say rigged, fraud. But if he had hit a home run, it would have been everything would have been perfect. And this is just how they govern themselves now. When it goes their way, it's perfect, everything's great. And when it doesn't go their way, it's tear down the institution, tear down the country, tear down the norms that have kept this republic going. And is what makes us the greatest country in the world is that we do have a constitution, we do have law and order, and no matter who you are, that's going to be applied equally by a jury of your peers.
Congressman, it's Anthony Davis here. I was just interested to know, within Congress, is there any planning or thought for how Donald Trump would react if he was to lose the election in November? Because obviously last time around, everybody was taken a little bit by surprise. And then obviously January 6th was something that we hope we never see again. But there is a lot of talk, especially in the right wing, of January 6th last time being a rehearsal, and this time round it'll be potentially bigger if it needs to happen again. Because off the back of this verdict today, it's not going to change his story. He's not going to go quietly. He's not going to kind of disappear into the sunset. He's, if anything, he's going to ramp up the energy, the negative energy surrounding his effective hate towards authority.
No, I actually think that's 100% correct. January 6th, they can call it, a rehearsal, a dress rehearsal. A lot of people were wearing all sorts of things. But I think you're exactly right. I think we're in uncharted territory. I think anyone out there who says they know exactly what this is going to mean, right, is just fibbing and guessing. Nobody really knows what this is going to mean. And we won't know that for a couple of weeks, right, until the American people digest this. We might not know that until we get to the sentencing phase and the American people can digest that. And so right now, right, we have a former president who's been indicted. He is absolutely going to go to the only place he knows, right? He's a one-trick pony. He's got only one thing in that hat that he's going to pull out, and that is going to be hate and division. It's going to be, rigged, Biden, fraud, the judge, right? And what I think he's going to do is he's going to turn to his people, and he's going to turn to the American public, and he's going to say, it's all about November 5th. If you don't want me to go to jail, you got to vote on November 5th. If you don't want me to go to jail, you got to donate on November 5th. If you want to stop what they're doing to me, you got to do this and you got to do that. There is no doubt that that's where he's going to go. But we have a presidential debate scheduled in less than a month. I mean, is that going to happen now? Is the Biden campaign going to debate a convicted felon? Is Trump going to go? Right? Is he going to pull out? It's super unclear. I think we're headed, but yeah, they're going to division. They're not asking for calm. They're not law and order. They're not respect the legal system. They're none of that. It's going to be all sorts of. And I imagine when I get back to the House, there's going to be resolutions and defund this and defund that. All of it for show. It's all nonsense because the Senate's not going to take any of that stuff. But yeah, this is now obviously going to take over the entire conversation over the next couple of weeks and months.
Congressman, here's what you posted moments ago, or about 47 minutes ago to be exact, on your social media. You reposted all of the times that Donald Trump said law and order, 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 law and order. I haven't counted if it was 34 times, like the amount of times he was just found criminally liable for. But why'd you post that?
Well, I'm using his words, right? They always used to say there's a Trump tweet for that. And in this instance, there's a Trump tweet for that, right? This is a guy who has built a lot of his campaign on the slogan, law and order, law and order, law and order. Well, okay, today was a day of law and order. And if you believe in law and order, then you have to believe in today's verdict. He'll get his chance to appeal just like anybody else would get their chance to appeal, and we'll go through that process. But again, this goes back to right now, the Maga wing of the Republican Party only believes in law and order if we win. If we lose, then we don't believe in law and order. We believe in these things if it helps us, but if it doesn't help us, we don't believe in these things. And so, I'm just using Trump's words to show that today was about law and order. He was not above the law. And a jury of his peers, 12 Americans who sat there and listened to the evidence, decided he was guilty on all charges.
Finally, you mentioned the debates. I've always thought there's zero chance that Donald Trump debates. He was the one who pulled out at one of the debates in 2020 after losing two of the other debates. One, he showed up with COVID and concealed that. I always thought it was a ruse when Donald Trump said he was going to debate the same way he always claims he's going to testify and never does. Would love to hear your prediction. I don't see it. I've never seen it. I think he'll come up with some excuse. He's already saying, oh, we need a drug test President Biden before. I just think the guy, no matter what, in addition to being a convicted felon, is also scared. I think he's a scared man, not even deep down, kind of like right up here, kind of on the surface, which is obvious to see. But what do you think, Congressmember, before you go?
No, I think that's right. And I think that goes back to the previous question. Like, what do we expect? What are Republicans going to do? Donald Trump is scared, right? Let's not pretend he's the tough guy, right? This is the guy who was asking the Secret Service to get rid of rubber chickens, okay, because it upset him. And so, no, he is scared. And that's why, again, I think we're really in uncharted territory. I don't think we know where this is going to go. I don't know if Trump is going to show up. I don't know if he's going to debate or he's not going to debate. We have no idea where this all goes. And don't get me wrong, we're going to spend hours guessing and pontificating, until we get there. And then obviously the Biden campaign will have to decide what they want to do. I mean, we now have, for the first time in American history, like we had when he was impeached twice, that no other president had ever been impeached twice. We had never had a president that had been indicted this many times. And now we have a president that has been found guilty of a felony on 34 counts. So we've never been here, before. But I do think that, as an American, that we have to look at this moment and we have to take a deep breath and we have to figure out as a country how we're going to get through this. Obviously, everything is in the eyes of the election, and everything is eyes on the, divisive nature of the politics and echo chambers that we live in. And we're going to have to deal with that over the next 6 months. But, the November election will be the most consequential election of your lifetime. I know we've said that 3 or 4 times, and maybe we were the boy who cried wolf. It clearly is the case this time around. There's just absolutely no doubt about it. And again, if Donald Trump were to win in November, we were already talking about the things that he might do. Just wait. You're going to hear the things that he's now going to talk about doing over the next 4 or 5 months. He's going to talk about that anger. We're going to hear about all these grandiose plans. It's now worse now. It will now be worse than we even thought it could be if he were to become president. I'm in Florida. The National Hurricane Center predicted that it was going to be a stormy summer.
Well, a stormy summer indeed, a very stormy summer, and I have other turns of phrases, but we'll keep this.
And my staff makes me keep most of that stuff in drafts.
I'll keep what I'm about to say in a mental draft as well. Congressmember Jared Moskowitz, thank you for joining us. And I also want to give a shout out to Congressmember Jared Moskowitz. Has a great YouTube channel where he brings the message directly to the people. And I love that you are taking that message to the people through that YouTube channel. So everyone should subscribe there as well. Congressmember Moskowitz, thanks as always.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Anthony Davis, back to you. You had Congressmember Jared Moskowitz's reaction right there. Always enjoy him on the Midas Touch network, and his YouTube channel is great. And I like also that he represents the new group, I think, of Democrats, or a new philosophy of like, we're not taking this crap anymore. Everything that he does and his colleagues like Jasmine Crockett and Jamie Raskin and others on the oversight committee do, going on the offense, I think is kind of like what we do here when it comes to pro-democracy messaging and truth, is not buying into the frameworks that lead you down a path where you can't even use the language to address the situation, which allows fascism to win when you have this kind of both sides crap and the media is just regurgitating what Trump is saying to them, even when it's not happening before our eyes and our observation. So I really appreciate everything that he and that new class of Democrats are doing, of course, led by the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries. I want to remind everybody here as well to subscribe to this YouTube channel. You'll get to see hosts like Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis Show Uncovered with Ron Filipkowski is a great show. We have the Midas Touch podcast, Legal AF, got Political Beatdown. We got the new show, Mistrial. Make sure you're subscribed to all of those shows. Lights On with Jessica Denson. Some great shows there. 5 Minute News. A bunch of shows that you have, Anthony. I want to remind everyone to go to store.midastouch.com as well. Get the exhibit that was actually talked about in the Trump criminal trial, Mar-a-Lardo Correctional Facility at store.midastouch.com. The other exhibit is the Convict, or now Convict 45 shirt at store.midastouch.com. The way we build this network is actually not through those outside investors that fund all of the big media. We have emojis, and we have Patreon, like patreon.com/Political Beatdown and patreon.com/Midas Touch, and our pro-democracy sponsors. That's how we build this thing. Let me turn it over to you, Anthony, for a little bit.
I've been thinking, Ben, as we talk about it, and I think, the first thing I've been getting is text messages from people. What does this mean? What's going to happen? Is he going to go to prison? And I've always been the type of person that doesn't like to predict. I like to live in the present, not the past or the future. And I think, our present is very relative. And that's why it's important that I think off the back of this verdict today, that people don't jump to conclusions. And that's why I asked the congressman earlier that whether or not Congress was prepared for what is yet to come, because what we now are going to have to deal with is a new version of Donald Trump as a convicted felon. Somebody who is going to be even more angry about the judiciary, even more angry about the DAs. I mean, think about the way he spoke about Alvin Bragg, some of the language, the racist backchat that he used. Same about Fani Willis. Any opportunity he can get to criticize people, blame them, make excuses and whine. And that's all fine. And the media can get distracted with that. But what we have to do is remain in the present. It's not about empty threats. It's not about he could do this or he could do that. What is happening right now? And today, on the 30th of May, 2024, Donald Trump, the disgraced former president, is now a convicted felon. And that has changed the whole dynamic of this election going into November. And I think, I'm not an American. I don't even get a chance to vote here. Would you believe immigrants can't vote? Just thought I'd point that out as it seems that much of the Republican Party would have you think otherwise. But, I get a sense that the American people are not stupid. They do not want a convicted felon in the White House. They recognize that all of the policies that we are starting to hear about through the backdoor, Project 2025 under the Heritage Foundation, the removal of rights, women's rights, the rights of LGBTQ people. They're going to, I'm sure they'll ban gay marriage if they had the chance. They're talking about banning contraception and pornography, turning the United States into the Handmaid's Tale. Nobody wants that. Nobody. Even Republicans or fiscal conservatives who have a social conscience, nobody wants that. So if we live in the present and we recognize that actually the legal system is up to standard, in this case, jurors, independent jurors, not the prosecutors, not the judge, they decided Donald Trump's fate. And, no amount of whining is going to change that. And that's why I think it's important that we stay measured and we recognize that we are living in this shared reality. Because the noise on Fox and the noise on Newsmax and the noise from Alina Harbour, for example, I mean, she is just constantly creating an entirely different narrative for Americans. And unfortunately, a lot of people buy into it and they believe it. But I do think that people are starting to get tired. Because would you believe it's almost a decade now? Almost 10 years of Trump's voice and his surrogates, people who are making stuff up about the status quo, when in reality Trump has always hung around criminals, he's always employed criminals, he's always felt comfortable with criminals, and we need to look at the record, and I mentioned this on Uncovered a couple of days ago with Ron, and that is that if you look at all of Trump's associates and henchmen, people that he surrounded himself with from 2016 onwards, and of course before, but I'm only talking about Trump when he became fair game, which is him being supposedly wanting to be a public servant. Never quite happened, did it? But people like Paul Manafort, who was his campaign manager in 2016, who he now thinks he'll bring back as his campaign manager. Manafort was sentenced to more than 7 years in prison after being convicted or pleading guilty to a whole bunch of charges, including bank and tax fraud and witness tampering and conspiracy against the United States. These are the people that Donald Trump is of. This is his group. And I often think of that photograph, that video of him and Jeffrey Epstein, when they were at the party and he's doing his dance and they're kind of perving at these poor girls. And it was just, I was like, that is the guy. That is who Donald Trump is. He isn't anything else. It really is as simple as that. And so today, these 34 felony charges, they only go to confirm that this is the way he runs his businesses. Of course, let's not forget that the Trump organization itself has been done for massive fraud recently. Alan Weisselberg, currently in prison, still not prepared to rat on his former employer. And that is very interesting, isn't it? That the Trump organization, supposedly separate from politics, although we know that he never divested of his interests, even though he wheeled on stage back in 2016 some kind of cart full of paperwork saying, this is Trump organization stuff, and I'm not going to have anything to do with it. He absolutely ran his business. He absolutely profiteered from being the president with his hotels in D.C. and all around the world, where he enabled foreign dignitaries to curry favor with him. And even now, look, he now owns DJT Media, right, which is the floated arm of Truth Social. I mean, anybody could buy shares and therefore seek to curry favor with Donald Trump as a presidential candidate or indeed as a future president. That in itself is, in my view, worthy of him not being allowed to be president. Unfortunately, having a felony conviction doesn't prevent him from running for president, and as we know, that is something that the founders never considered. The reality is that he can be elected president as a convicted felon. There's nothing in the Constitution, nothing in federal law that prevents a felon from holding the nation's highest office. And while many federal employees would not be hired if they had a felony conviction on their record, the Constitution, the only thing it says is you've got to be over 35 and you've got to have been born in the United States. Of course, that didn't apply to Barack Obama. That's a joke. So, we are living in the upside down in a way because Donald Trump has taken the Republican Party with him. There is no Republican Party anymore, really. It is the party of Trump. And in Donald Trump, we have a man who is now a convicted felon. So much of his business dealings have been kind of opened wide for us all to see. We know so much more about the Trump organization now than we did before. We know that he signs off on everything, that he's very tight when it comes to the numbers. As Michael Cohen was telling us, he is somebody who wants to be across every single check and making the financial director negotiate down on every check that they had to write. I mean, that in itself is so awful, isn't it? Everyone from workmen and caterers and anybody, doing like regular work. Donald Trump, supposedly the wealthy guy, claiming that, oh no, we got to negotiate that down. So it's very, very interesting. We're starting to really see who Donald Trump is, both as a private individual with his kind of weird fake marriage and Melania for hire, but also as a businessman in the Trump organization. And he ran the presidency the same way that he ran the Trump organization, which is like a family business. And sadly, you cannot run a country like you can some kind of real estate company in Manhattan.
Well, Anthony, you always hear Republicans saying we should run the country like a company or like a
Yeah, like a
corporation
business,
or
right.
whatever. So
Yeah.
you mentioned DJT. Yeah. DJT lost $300 million last quarter. It only earned $700,000 in revenue on a $300 million net loss. Yet the stock is somehow trading in areas that would give it a billions and billions of dollars valuation, when in fact, if you just looked at the basic math and said you have 200 million plus outstanding shares, what could be the valuation of a company that does, I don't know, maybe 4 million in revenue in a year? But even if I didn't factor in the hundreds of millions of dollars in losses, why wouldn't you factor that in? What would be the valuation? $5 million? I mean, I'm not giving stock advice. I'm giving you my opinion. $5 million valuation at most, maybe a negative valuation. Yet it's trading in these, everything around him, everything he does is shady and has all of the same dynamics associated with him. There's two moments too I want to leave everybody with. This first moment is Donald Trump sitting in the small conference room with his son, Don Jr. Donald Trump's surrounded by junk food, Coke, Coca-Cola, to be clear, Milk Duds, all this other candy, like actual candy, again, once again, to be clear, real candy. And just take a look at what Donald Trump and Don Jr. said. And this is like a selfie video that Don Jr. made. And what they're talking about is Don Jr. is like, "Hey, Dad, my dad's about to fire off a mean tweet, everybody. My dad's going to send a really mean tweet to everybody." And then Donald Trump's like, "Yes, son, I'm very proud of your social media. You send the mean tweet. Here, let me just show it to you," because this is just one of these moments that I think we need to reflect upon, that this ain't normal. Here, play this clip.
Hey guys, I'm here with your favorite president. We're cranking out a couple mean tweets at the courthouse. Why don't you read that last one, because I think it's pretty
Well,
epic.
I think I'm going to put it out instead of reading it, but I know my son's doing very well on social media. I'm proud of him.
Stay tuned. It'll be a doozy.
Stay tuned. It's going to be a doozy. My daddy's going to send a really mean message out. I'm going to be really mean. And I may send a mean message. It's like, you know when President Biden goes, "This is the United States of America." What is that? How have we gotten to a point where whatever the heck that is something that is a thing? Not to mention all of his posts. He posts QAnon stuff thousands of times, Unified Reich. But, he calls up on stage people who were just indicted for murder. He has Chef G and Sleepy Hollow, people who are alleged to be leaders of the Crips. The alleged leaders of the Crips who engaged in 12 attempted murders that are known about as alleged in a 140 count indictment. They're on the stage in a Republican presidential campaign because Donald Trump wants the black vote. Like, what are we talking about?
But Ben, that dining room where they were off the courtroom, that could have been the dining room off the Oval Office. And we should think about that, because that is how he ran the presidency. He sat there with his Coke and with his burgers and his takeout and his delivery, and he ran the presidency like a slob running the Trump organization, which was never successful. Let's be clear about that. All of these businesses, as we know, have failed in the same way that Truth Social has failed. And I'm sure we're going to see some very dramatic news over the coming months with the stock price. But let's remember, them slobbing out, sitting there, kind of leaning and covered in ketchup. That is how he ran the presidency. And to think, we know the story about him throwing the ketchup at the wall in the Oval Office. So let's not kid ourselves in thinking that he has any ability to step up and be presidential. He didn't do it the last 4 years. He certainly won't do it again. He really is a shadow, not even of his former self, because he's always been one of these, like a maverick, a fake, making phone calls to newspapers, claiming to be somebody else to talk about Donald Trump, or ramping up his income, his value, certainly with his properties. Just ask Fawny Willis, or even making fake articles about him on the cover of magazines so that he could hang them in his halls. That's who he is. And I think it really was an anomaly that he got elected in 2016. Personally, I blame Vladimir Putin and James Comey equally, but he hasn't won anything since. And I think it's very easy to get distracted and be like, oh, he's popular, because all the networks are talking about it. The only person that tells us he's popular is him. He is the one that has created this propaganda. He is not popular. He won by a hair. He didn't win the popular vote. He didn't win again in 2020. Didn't win the popular vote then by a large margin. He doesn't stand a chance of winning. Yet there is this rhetoric that, oh, you know, he's going to come back. And I just don't think the American people are that stupid.
Well, I agree with you. Today's a day where I am proud to be an American. I really am. I'm proud to be an American who supports law and order. And I'm just so proud to be a part of this community, this mighty community. And I always hear from everybody, and I'm so grateful for you saying how important and helpful this community has been for all of you watching and listening. It's been equally as important and helpful to me to find this community that you all built. Kind of took away the network model and we built a community first model here that's been focused on being diligent and being meticulous and going through the facts and going through the evidence. And where the media is pushing one narrative, I don't even watch what they're doing to follow it. Sometimes I watch it to criticize it. But we've just been focused, not what they're saying or doing. We've been focused on what the facts are. And I think if you go back and you watch our coverage here on the Midas Touch Network that goes back, 2.5, 3 years ago when we started talking about the possibility of criminal indictments. And then if you specifically focus on our trial coverage here, led by Karen Friedman Agnifilo, the former number 2 at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office with almost 30 years of experience in that office. She led our coverage here of this case, and she would give us all of the inside information and all the insights here first about everything that was going on that was publicly available. She would bring that and get us all of the data here first. I mean, how fortunate were we to have that opportunity to have Karen share that with all of us publicly here? It was helpful for me. I would be excited to say, okay, can't wait to see what Karen has to say. I'm going to actually miss doing that live coverage every morning with with Karen. I may have those like when I studied for the bar exam, when I had those like withdrawals that I would wake up thinking that the bar exam was the next day. That's kind of how I think I'm going to feel like. But I want to leave everybody with this message. It's such an honor for me to have people like Anthony Davis, Ron Filipkowski, Dina Dahl. I get to work with my younger brothers. I could go on and list all of our co-hosts and correspondents. It would take another half hour, and I got to get prepared for the show I do with my younger brothers. But I'm just so proud of this community for standing strong and spreading the word about the Midas Touch Network, spreading the word about shows like Political Beatdown and Legal AF and the Midas Touch podcast and Uncovered, hosted by Anthony Davis and Ron Filipkowski, and all of our other shows here on the Midas Touch Network. And it's a growing slate of shows. This is a moment that I think I said it before, and I'll leave us with this thought, that it's also time that we, the people, reclaim law and order, and we, the people, reclaim the fourth estate. That's been kind of another story here, layered underneath, I think, all of the Trump trial, that the coverage here has been the top of all coverage on digital, where everything's moving to anyway in the entire world. Because what people are saying is enough of the old guard, enough of the crap. We truly do stand for the Constitution here. We truly do care about law and order here. We see that in the verdict, and we see that in the verdict about the coverage. And I think both verdicts came out the right way in this criminal trial. I'm just so honored. I know I go on and say how honored I am, but I just can't thank you all enough. We'll keep on growing this together. Anthony, thank you for co-hosting this at the end. And any last things you want to say, Anthony, before we go? I want to remind everybody as well that the weekend show is hosted by Anthony as well. And make sure you check that out every Sunday. There's a new episode of the weekend show, and Uncovered and the weekend show are both of Anthony's shows, and they are incredible. So make sure you check that out. I'm going to be doing the Midas Touch podcast. I'll probably try to take a 10-minute break. So I can try to eat a little food or something or before I go live with my younger brothers, Brett and Jordy, for the Midas Touch show. That will start soon. You don't have to even go anywhere, folks. It'll take you automatically into the Midas Touch podcast, which will start in about 20 minutes or so. And Anthony, before giving you the final thought for the sign off, I want to remind everybody again to go to store.midastouch.com. Those Cohen tees are selling out, the ones that were the exhibit. So make sure you get the Mar-a-Lardo Correctional Facility shirt, the real ones, on store.midastouch.com. Do not go get the fake ones that are out there. There's a lot of knockoffs. Store.midastouch.com. You can also get the Convict 45 now, Convict 45. It's a both work, but now it's Convict 45. Store.midastouch.com. Another exhibit there. There's patreon.com/political beatdown. Help support this show. That's the way we grow this platform. Patreon.com/political beatdown. Also, Mea Culpa Blue, the Mea Culpa Blue audio podcast. Subscribe there as well on the Midas Touch Network. Subscribe to the Midas Touch podcast, Legal AF, Uncovered, the weekend show as well. And you can also check out patreon.com/Midas Touch. Anthony, last thoughts before we go from you.
I was just going to say that, and I'm sure you get this as well. People write to me and they see the stuff that we do on Midas Touch and they're like, this is so good. We've been waiting for this. You guys should be on the mainstream media because everyone needs to hear this. And I'm like, no. And I think this is what people need to understand is this is not us auditioning to be on the mainstream media. We show up in T-shirts and shirts and in various states of undress sometimes just to get on with the facts. And that's how we do it. And I love watching Ben, see how he's done his hair and what tchotchkes he's got on the shelf behind him. But we don't care for all the trappings of the mainstream media. We just care for the truth. And we are vehemently pro-democracy and extremely proud of that. And so that's what I would say is that's what I'm here for, and hopefully that's what you're here for too. And it is an historic day, undoubtedly, as the disgraced former president has been found guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the criminal hush money scheme to influence the outcome of the 2016 election. I've heard cheers in the street near where I live as I came out to come and talk to you. I could literally hear people applauding and clapping and celebrating, kind of flowing just through the air. And I was like, wow. It felt like that when Biden won the election in 2020. People were kind of whooping in the street. And I recognize that today is also a significant day for that very reason, only because justice has finally caught up with him.
Shout out to the Brigaders and shout out to the Midas Mighty. A great day for America.
Enough! Send him to the big house, not the White House. Get the new exclusive tees, mugs, and stickers right now at store.midastouch.com. That's store.midastouch.com.